Chapter 28. The servants had already prepared a feast in the main hall. When the three of them entered, it was still steaming and fragrant. Come, come, come. You haven't eaten good food in a long time since you went to that bitter cold place in the northwest, right? These are all your favorite dishes. Hurry and put your sister down so you can have a few bites. Old Madame Fu called out. Yu Xiang also struggled to get down from the wheelchair. Yu Pinyin reluctantly put his sister in the wheelchair. He first filled old Madame Fu's cup and said hoarsely, "Venerable ancestor, your grandson has been gone for so many years. It must have been hard on you. Your grandson will punish himself with a cup." Old Madame Fu's tears began to flow again. However, she heard Yu Xiang say angrily, "Brother, we're all family. There's no need to talk about suffering or punishment. You're working hard outside, so let's take care of this family. Everyone has their own responsibilities and lives. Don't drink on an empty stomach. Hurry and eat." With that, she snatched the wine cup and stuffed a jade shrimp dumpling into his mouth. Yu Pinyin hurriedly swallowed the dumpling and lovingly rubbed his sister's head. Old Madame Fu chimed in, "Xiang is right. Let's take care of this family. There's no need to say those empty words of courtesy. We haven't seen each other for so many years, yet you're treating your venerable ancestor like a stranger. You deserve a beating." Yu Xiang picked up the small whip hanging from her wheelchair and lightly whipped her brother's arm. "Little girl, you're getting fiercer and fiercer. As expected of my sister." Yu Pinyin laughed loudly. The more he looked at his cute sister, the more he liked her. He couldn't help but carry her onto his lap and reach out to pinch the tip of her nose. Yu Xiang stole a shrimp dumpling and stuffed it into his mouth. The brother and sister quarreled. "Sit down and eat. After you're done eating, you too can be affectionate. You're already so old, yet you're still acting like a child." Old Madame Fu reprimanded, but her face was full of smiles. Yu Pinyin swallowed the shrimp dumpling and touched his sister's forehead. He asked, "Why is there a bruise here?" Old Madame Fu was about to speak when Yu Xiang interrupted, "I heard that you're back. I was so happy that I bumped into the doorpost. It's all your fault." Since her grandson was back, she didn't need to let him know about her past hardships. With that in mind, the old lady shut her mouth. Yu Pinyin believed her and chuckled. "Okay, it's all my fault. In the future, all the mistakes that Xiang makes will be my fault. No matter how big the problem is, I'll shoulder it for you." The atmosphere was just right. However, Mama Ma came in with a solemn expression and reported softly, "The old lady, Madam, is here." "Why is she here all of a sudden?" The smile on the old lady's face instantly disappeared. On such a good day, she really didn't want to see the Lin clan's jinx. Yu Pinyin's expression did not change, but his eyes gradually turned cold. If he hadn't heard Mama Ma mention it, he would have almost forgotten about his mother. Every 10 days, Yu Xiang and the great ancestor would write a letter to him, along with a lot of clothes, shoes and socks. Even the dry rations, which were never lacking in the camp, would be delivered in dozens of caddies. The rations were sweet and salty, which often made him not know whether to laugh or cry. However, it was as if the Lin clan did not have a son like him. Not to mention a piece of paper, they didn't even send a thread. In the past, Yu Pinyin often wondered if he was like Xiang and not her biological son. But now, this question could no longer trouble him. In order to match the festive atmosphere, Mrs. Lin wore a pink dress, which was a rare sight. She wore a butterfly hairpin in her hair and slowly walked in. She smiled and said, "Mother, what are you saying? Why can't I come? Yandere has returned to the capital after a great victory. We should properly celebrate for him." When she saw Yu Xiang sitting in Yu Pinyin's arms, she smiled coldly and reprimanded, "Hurry up and come down. You're sitting in your brother's arms when we're eating. What a scandal." Yu Xiang did not care, but she pulled Yu Pinyan's sleeve and asked him to put her down. The tenderness floating in the air was completely washed away by her words. The matriarch laughed angrily and said coldly, "It's hard for you to remember that Yandere is your son. What were you doing when he was fighting a war outside? Embroidering Junjia's portrait? Were you planning to embroider another portrait for Yandere after you were done?" As soon as she finished speaking, the matriarch hurriedly slapped her own mouth and anxiously muttered, "Buddha, please don't blame me. I was so angry that I became muddle-headed. Please don't blame me, Buddha." The Lin clan member sat down and said with hidden bitterness, "Mother, you burned all of my husband's belongings. This daughter-in-law had no choice but to embroider a portrait. Didn't I already listen to you and stop using the needle and thread? Yandere, how are you doing in the northwest? Did you get hurt?" Yu Pinyan stared at his sister who was moving things into her bowl like a hamster. His eyes were smiling, but his voice was calm. "Mother, thank you for your concern. This child is doing well." Yu Xiang covered her cheek with one hand and mouthed silently to her brother, "Hurry up and eat. Don't talk nonsense." Yu Pinyan couldn't help but smile. He lovingly and pitifully rubbed her lips, then lowered his head to eat. The Lin clan also symbolically picked up some food for him with her chopsticks and said softly, "Eat slowly. Don't choke. I heard that you were promoted to General Guangwei this time. You have 180,000 elite soldiers under your command." Yu Pinyan didn't comment. He fed his sister a spoonful of egg custard and watched her swallow with a smile. Yu Xiang also picked up her spoon and fed him a spoonful. The siblings ate back and forth, eating with great relish. The matriarch was overjoyed. She repeatedly called for the servant to add another bowl of egg custard. When her son came back from his first war, he couldn't eat for 3 whole months. He vomited at the sight of meat and vegetables. He was so thin that he didn't even look human. She heard that people who came back from their first war were all like this. No amount of medicine could cure them. He had to figure it out on his own. She had a deep impression of this. She was afraid that her grandson would be like his father and get this strange disease. Now, her grandson looked full of energy and ate with relish. Her heart, which had been hanging high for a year and a half, was finally at ease. The Lin clan was a bit embarrassed when they saw that no one was paying attention to them. Fortunately, she was a heartless person. She didn't care about anyone other than her late husband. She quickly adjusted herself and said, "Now that we have more people, shouldn't we hurry up your sister?" Yu Pinyan slammed his bowl on the table with a bang and coldly glanced over. "Mother, don't talk so much when you're eating." Then, he lowered his head to look at Xiang'er. When he saw her confused expression, the frost in his eyes melted slightly. So she came here because of this matter. Who was more important, the son who grew up in her lap or the daughter she had never met? Old Madame Fu was so angry that her hands trembled. Because the word daughter always came from the Lin clan, and it was always picked at times like this, old Madame Fu's expectations for her granddaughter were dwindling day by day until she was completely indifferent. It wasn't that she didn't want to find her daughter, but couldn't she let her grandson rest for a few days? He had just returned from the smoke-filled battlefield, and he was in a hurry to find her for her. What did she take him for? A stone that didn't know fatigue or pain? Old Madame Fu suppressed her anger. She looked at Yu Xiang and gently said, "Xiang'er, old Madame Fu has something to say to your mother. You should go back first." With that, she ordered Mama Ma to pack up some good dishes and have Tao Hong, Lu, take them back. Yu Xiang didn't want to know about her background now, so she obediently agreed. Yu Pinyan carried her back and applied ointment on her bruised forehead. He coaxed her to finish her meal before returning to the main hall. As usual, the Lin clan member was holding a handkerchief in her hand to wipe her tears. When she saw him, she choked out, "I know the battlefield is dangerous, but isn't it dangerous for my daughter to wander outside? The world is so chaotic, and that family Shen is a businessman. They can become rich or poor in the blink of an eye. What kind of good life can my daughter have in his family? She can't compare to Yennere's high position and wealth. Shut up. Do you think our wealth comes from the wind? Yennefer risked his life for it. Other than your daughter, do you have any place for Yandere in your heart? Is he really your biological son, huh? Old Madame Fu flew into a rage and slammed the table loudly. Yu Pinyin stepped forward and held her wrist, gently rubbing it. When he spoke again, his tone was cold and heavy. Mother, I'll order people to look for him right now. Even if we have to turn Lingnan upside down, we'll find him for you. When my sister comes back in the future, you can live peacefully with her. Don't cause me any more trouble. After repaying this favor, I can't care about the two of you anymore. The Lin clan didn't understand his unspoken meaning, but old Madame Fu did. She looked at her grandson, twirled her prayer beads, and finally let out a long sigh. Forget it. With a mother like this, who would be able to maintain their familial ties? She had gotten to where she was today because of Madame Lin's own request. Only then did the Lin clan stop crying and leave. The grandmother and grandson sat facing each other in silence. After a quarter of an hour, old Madame Fu asked in a low voice, "Is Xiang'er asleep?" "She's asleep." Yu Pinyin nodded. Old Madame Fu sighed at the beam of the room. "Your mother is thoughtless, but your sister is sincere. She's not related by blood, but her feelings for you are not fake at all. Do you really think she hit her forehead against a doorpost? It's because she prayed for you every day. Today, it's gone, but tomorrow, she's praying for her life again. I can't bear to see it." She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and continued, "When your biological sister comes back in the future, don't cast Xiang'er aside and not care about her." Yu Pinyin's throat was very tight. He raised his hand and downed a cup of strong liquor. In a hoarse voice, he said, "Look at what you're saying. How could I cast Xiang'er aside? Although she's not my biological sister, we're closer than one. Old madam, don't worry. Even if I mistreat someone, I won't mistreat Xiang'er." "Oh right, how's Xiang'er's health?" "She's fine now. A month after you left, she suddenly had an attack of angina. The doctor came to see her every day, but he couldn't find anything. Before the attack, she seemed to have a nightmare and shouted, 'Brother, get out of the way.'" Old Madame Fu looked at her grandson with prying eyes. Yu Pinyin's eyes flashed slightly. He took out a deformed copper coin from his inner pocket and smiled bitterly. "There's actually such a strange thing as telepathy in the world. At that time, I was killing the enemy. In a trance, I heard Xiang'er telling me to get out of the way. Only then did I avoid the arrow that was shot from the back. Then, I used this copper coin to block the arrow. It only hurt my chest for half a month, but it didn't hurt my flesh. I killed the enemy on the battlefield and caused Xiang'er to suffer with me. What does Buddha want to do? I killed a living thing, so it's enough to punish me alone." Yu Pinyin had never believed in Buddha, but at this time, he had no choice but to believe. Old Madame Fu was stunned for a long time before she came back to her senses. She hurriedly comforted him, "How is this Buddha's punishment?" "This is Buddha's blessing. Looking around, who else in the world can be as lucky as you to come back from the brink of death? Don't think too much. It's good that you're back." After saying this, she took the copper coin and touched it again. From then on, she firmly believed that Yu Xiang was a Tai noble. Yu Pinyin said goodbye to old Madame Fu and went straight to Yu Xiang's room. The little girl was sleeping very sweetly. Her small mouth was slightly open, and her breath was slightly fragrant. Yu Pinyin leaned closer to look at her bruised forehead and used his fingertips to trace her increasingly delicate facial features. He felt as if he was soaked in blood, and his cold and hard heart completely softened. He took off his boots and his battle robe, lay down beside her and closed his eyes peacefully. Tao Hong and Lulu didn't know whether to call or not, so they had to go find Mama Ma. Chapter 29. 2 years later. A black canopied carriage was galloping on the road, but the horse neighed, causing the carriage to sway. The coachman waved his whip and scolded, "Where did this blind man come from? You were walking nicely, but you suddenly rolled under my wheels. Are you trying to blackmail me or something? Why didn't you take a good look at whose carriage this is and see if you can afford to offend it?" The other party was still lying on the ground and didn't talk back. He only raised his arms slightly, as if trying to block the dazzling sunlight above his head. The coachman kept scolding, "Why are you still here? Hurry up and get up, or else the horse will trample you to death." The passers-by all stopped and pointed at the vicious coachman. The curtain of the carriage suddenly opened, and a delicate and pretty face peeked out with an ingot of silver in his hand. He said, "Here's your silver. Take it and leave quickly. Don't waste our time." Only then did the other party stand up shakily. He raised his chin slightly, revealing an exceptionally handsome face. His slender eyebrows were slanted to his temples, and his long and narrow phoenix eyes were slightly raised. His dark and deep pupils were captivating, and that flawless face could be said to be peerless. He bowed and said warmly, "Miss, this one isn't blackmailing." The little girl couldn't help but let out a "whoa" and interrupted him stutteringly, "No, not blackmailing. Could it be that you're seeking death? What is it that you want to do? Take the silver and get through this hurdle, isn't it?" This time, there was gentleness and pity in her tone, which was completely different from her previous harsh tone. The young man repeatedly waved his hand and was about to explain when he saw another head peek out of the window. This time, it was a face that was even more exquisite and perfect than the young man's. Her porcelain white skin seemed to be transparent under the sunlight, and her eyes were big and round, filled with endless spiritual energy and bright charm. Her pink lips pouted, and impatience leaked out. "Why are you saying so much nonsense? You're not even afraid of death, yet you're afraid of living. Take it." She raised her hand and threw an even bigger ingot of silver at the young man's face. The young man cried out in pain, and a big bump quickly appeared on his forehead. Her maidservant covered her face with her hands, feeling rather embarrassed. "Miss, I can't accept your silver. I'm not seeking death, but—" The young man picked up the silver and handed it back, but the young girl raised her chin slightly and said arrogantly, "You're clearly seeking death, but you don't have the face to admit it. How cowardly! As long as you live with the determination to die, how can you not live like a man? Take the money and get out of here. When you rise up in the future, you can throw it back at my face. Let's see if you have the ability to do so." She lowered the curtain of the carriage to cover that bright and beautiful face. She chuckled, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and leave." The coachman hurriedly complied and slowly drove the carriage away. The young man stared at the disappearing carriage, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She was clearly a good girl with a soft heart, but she had to hide her kindness under sharp and harsh words. She was so domineering even when she was giving favors. If it was someone else who wasn't smart, they would probably hate her. Her temperament was really indescribably awkward, but it was also awkward and cute. The young man walked step by step to the side of the street and casually found a clean place to sit down. He wasn't blackmailing, nor was he seeking death. It was just an illness left behind by the hardships of his early years. As long as he got up violently or didn't eat for a long time, he would feel dizzy and his limbs would become weak. If he wasn't careful, he would fall in front of the carriage. However, that master and servant pair didn't listen to him finish his words. He didn't know how to guess his lamentable life experience. The young man looked down and found that his clothes were dirty from the fall. There was also a big hole in the hem. He looked really down and out. No wonder. He shook his head and chuckled, murmuring, "Let me throw the silver at your face. In any case, you should at least leave me a name." Suddenly, he remembered that there was no girl who would tell him her name the first time they met. The other party didn't covet his reward at all. She just gave him a thought to live, even if this thought was malicious. The more he felt that the girl was indescribably awkward and cute, the young man stood up and walked to the grocery store across the street. He asked, "Shopkeeper, whose carriage was that just now? Did you see the picture of a running wolf on the carriage? That's the family use emblem." The young man's eyes flashed and he continued to ask, "Is it that family you?" The shopkeeper nodded, "Except for Marquis Yongla, whose family's young miss is so crafty. She even threw 10 taels of silver at people's heads. Isn't she afraid that something bad will happen? I heard that their young miss has a poisonous heart. If a word doesn't go her way, she will whip people. No girl in the capital dares to provoke her, not to mention her brother, who is both the commander of the capital and the general of the cavalry. He dotes on her so much that the girl who was whipped almost had her head cut off when she came to his door to ask for justice." After saying that, the shopkeeper shook his head again and again. His eyes were full of horror. The young man thanked him in a low voice and bought a bag of rice cakes to eat at the door. He looked a little absent-minded. He never thought that the girl was actually his biological sister. What crafty, what heart poison, they were all just slander. They were just using a sharp outer shell to protect themselves. At the age of 10, his legs were crippled and half of his life was ruined. If he didn't act strong, how could he live? Thinking of this, the young man lost his appetite. He threw the rice cakes to the little beggar who had been waiting for a long time and left with heavy steps. Marquis Yongla, main courtyard. The matriarch was talking to a gorgeously dressed woman. From time to time, she turned her head to ask Mama, "When will young miss come back?" "It's already this time. I think she'll be back soon." Mama walked to the door and looked at the sky. The matriarch held the woman's well-maintained hand and smiled, "I won't hide it from you. The household's affairs are now all handled by my granddaughter. I haven't been in charge for 2 or 3 years. You came in a hurry this time. You didn't even prepare food, clothing, accommodation, and transportation. If I don't wait for my granddaughter to come back, I'll be at a loss for a while. I'm old and useless." The woman pursed her lips and smiled, "Old matriarch, what are you saying? You have such a capable granddaughter. I don't know how many lifetimes of good fortune you've accumulated. Look at you, your hair is already gray. You look 10 years younger than my mother. If she came in person, she might be envious." The matriarch was coaxed by the woman and repeatedly asked about her old friend's recent situation. The two were talking and laughing when Yuxiang came in from outside. The sound of the wheelchair turning attracted the matriarch's attention. She smiled and said, "Speak of the devil. Xianger, quickly come and greet your Auntie Pei. Her mother was my good sister before I got married." The woman saw Yuxiang's legs under the blanket and her expression was slightly surprised. She originally thought that the obedient and capable granddaughter the matriarch was referring to was the eldest concubine-born daughter of the Marquis household, Yu Xiu. She didn't expect it to be Yuxiang who had broken her legs and couldn't walk. The story of Yuxiang risking her life to save her brother was known by everyone, but it couldn't save her reputation as being more and more disagreeable and crafty. The phrase, "one's appearance comes from one's heart," clearly didn't apply to the young girl in front of her. Her appearance was very delicate, and she looked even more beautiful than the golden sunlight outside the courtyard. Especially her pair of big and round eyes, they were dark and clear. When she looked over, it was as if there were countless little hooks that pierced straight into one's heart. Although she was only 14 years old and hadn't reached marriageable age, she was very tall and had a delicate figure. She lost her legs and became a cripple at the age of 10, but there wasn't a trace of decadence or inferiority on her face. As soon as she entered the hall, she opened her small mouth and sweetly called out to people. She was really very likable. She wasn't as unbearable as the rumors said. Her appearance and bearing were completely different from what the woman had imagined. She stared blankly for a while before coming back to her senses. She held the young girl's white wrist and sighed, "This is Xiang'er. I haven't seen you in a long time and you've grown so big. When you were 1 month old, Auntie even hugged you. It was just a little bit." She raised her hand and gestured. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and laughed softly. Her black and white cat eyes were filled with fragments of bright sunlight, causing the woman to feel dizzy. She secretly sighed in her heart, this kind of peerless beauty is no worse than the beautiful Min Guifei of the past. It's just a pity that her legs, the matriarch also laughed. She raised a hand to stroke her granddaughter's hair and said softly, "Your auntie is accompanying your cousin to the capital to take the imperial exam. A month ago, your cousin entered the top 10 in the metropolitan exam and is only waiting to take the court exam in a month. Because she found a nest of termites in the courtyard she rented, it really isn't safe, so she borrowed our house to stay for a while. That's good. Who knows, maybe in a month, the bailiffs from the Ministry of Rights will come to pick up a top scholar from our house. It's a good opportunity for us to join in the celebration." Yu Xiang's words made Auntie Pei laugh. Auntie Pei repeatedly said that she was a clever person. Yu Xiang teased her a bit and said seriously, "Since it's to prepare for the exam, I'll have people tidy up Tietsue Yuan on the east side. Although it's remote, the environment is very quiet and is suitable for cousin to study. If Auntie is worried, you can go take a look yourself. If there's anything missing, I'll immediately have them do it. You're tired from the journey. After tidying up the courtyard and eating, you should quickly rest." After saying that, she ordered people to clean up the courtyard and prepare a banquet. The matriarch squinted her eyes and drank tea on the couch. Her posture was very leisurely. The Pei clan originally thought that the matriarch was boasting. How capable could a cripple be? However, they didn't expect Yu Xiang to handle everything properly. She was also very witty and humorous. She wasn't any worse than a healthy and well-mannered young lady. She was secretly speechless. When Yu Xiang went back to the room to change clothes, she asked, "Old matriarch, don't you still have a granddaughter? Call her out for me to see. She still has to live here for a month. In any case, let me see her face." Speaking of Yu Xiu, the matriarch was a bit uncomfortable. She glanced at the Pei clan and was somewhat suspicious. "You're in such a hurry to see my granddaughter. Is it because," the Pei clan nodded without hiding anything, "Old matriarch, you see, Jichen is just 20 years old this year. It's time for him to get married. You and my mother are like sisters. If you and my husband's family get married, wouldn't it be a beautiful thing?" The Pei clan's husband was the Salt Transport Commissioner, Si Yuntong. Although he was only a fourth-rank official and was also an external official, he was in charge of the world's salt policy. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was overflowing with wealth. If Yu Xiu married over, she would enjoy endless glory, splendor, wealth, and luxury. As her biological grandmother, she was naturally happy. But when she thought of the emperor's recent strict investigation of the national treasury, the matriarch began to hesitate. The Salt Transport Commissioner, Si Yuntong, was responsible for inspecting the major salt pans. The person sitting in this position was definitely not clean. It was better not to cause trouble for Yandere. What marriage? Wait until they finished the exam and quickly cut ties. Chapter 30. Yu Xiu was embroidering Buddhist scriptures for the matriarch when she heard the chatter of the young maidservants. "Did you see the 2 honored guests in the residence today? That dress, that get-up, what a grand style. I heard that it's the daughter of the old lady's old friend. Her husband's family is the Salt Transport Commissioner. This time, she's accompanying her son to the capital for the imperial examinations. How did he do? Of course he got into the top 10. Otherwise, why would he stay in the capital to wait for the court examinations? Marquis is a favorite of His Majesty. If he lives in our Marquis's mansion, others can see his family's connections, right? So he's here to take advantage of them. Of course he'll have to ask Master Ho for help. What do you mean? That person is the Salt Transport Commissioner, the most popular job in the entire Han dynasty. In terms of family wealth, two marquis household can't compare to him at all. Moreover, his young master is exceptionally handsome and elegant. He's not inferior to Master Ho. You sly girl, how do you know so clearly? I saw him when I passed by the front courtyard. He was drinking wine with Master Ho at the pavilion in the middle of the lake. His movements were so elegant. At this point, the young maidservants began to laugh and joke around. Yu unconsciously stopped embroidering and listened attentively. At this moment, the matriarch's head maidservant, Wan Chiu, lifted the curtain and said, "Eldest miss, there are honored guests in the residence. The matriarch invites you to meet them." Yu's spirits were lifted. She hurriedly threw away her embroidery and found her most fitting dress to change into. She hurried to the main courtyard and entered the residence right after Yu Xiang. Although Yu's appearance was not as dazzling as Yu Xiang's, she was still elegant and beautiful. Compared to Yu Xiang's bright and flamboyant appearance, she had a much more gentle and virtuous temperament. Although Marquis Yongle was only a concubine's daughter and had a poor background, Marquis Yongle held an important position in the emperor's heart and had grown up with the crown prince. This was enough to ensure Marquis Yongle's prosperity for the next 100 years. To marry Marquis Yongle, even if it was a concubine's daughter, the Fong family could be considered to be climbing up the social ladder. Furthermore, the Fong family was in danger. Other than Marquis Yongle, who was the commander of the imperial court, no one could save them. Thinking up to this point, the members of the Pei clan took out 2 jadeite bracelets and put them on for both of them. Then, they pulled Yu in front of them and questioned her affectionately. Yu was so excited that her fingertips were trembling. She glanced at Yu Xiang, who was slowly sipping her tea, and a sense of satisfaction flowed out of her eyes. If she married into the Fong family, there would be endless glory and wealth waiting for her. It would not be any worse than the Marquis household. Moreover, the legitimate son of the Fong family was not only talented, but also extraordinarily handsome. He was the dream husband of millions of noble ladies. On the other hand, Yu Xiang was a cripple and a bastard. How long could she be proud of herself? A huge sense of satisfaction rose in her heart. She became even more attentive to please the Pei clan. How could the matriarch not see through her thoughts? She was very angry at her eagerness to curry favor with them, but she could not say it out loud. She could only urge the servants to quickly prepare the meal. She also ordered the servants to add a few dishes to go with the wine for her grandson and Fang Jichen in the front courtyard. After a round of toasting, the Pei clan was finally satisfied. They bid farewell to the matriarch and returned to Tietsue Yuan to rest. The matriarch ordered someone to lead the way for her. She turned back to look at Yu and said in a low voice, "You are 16 this year. It is time for you to look at other people. I'm sure you're well aware of why Madame Pei has called you here today. I won't say anything else. I just want to remind you that rushing is not a business transaction. Open your eyes and see clearly. Don't jump into the fire pit and drag me, Marquis Yongle, down with you." Yu looked somewhat humiliated. She lowered her head and vaguely agreed, "Old ancestor is right. Granddaughter understands. Then you may leave." The matriarch looked at Yu Xiang and her expression softened. "Xiang, just came back from praying at the Zhenghua temple. She must be tired. Let's go together." Yu Xiang sweetly agreed. Before she left the courtyard, the nanny in charge of purchasing cloth and jewelry hurriedly came over and reported, "Young miss, the cloth for the spring clothes has arrived. The shopkeeper of Splendid Pavilion just sent it over. Please go and inspect it. Push me over." Yu Xiang lazily waved her hand. The spring sun was late, and the flowers were luxuriant. She had just drunk a few cups of wine and smelled the rich fragrance of flowers. She wished she could buy a soft bed under the sun and sleep on the spot. However, Wuxia was very excited. When she heard this, she silently followed behind her. The shopkeeper had been waiting for a long time. When he saw Wuxia, he hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. His attitude was very flattering. Wuxia didn't dare to say a word as she inspected the cloth. This woman had sharp eyes. She could tell whether the cloth was good or bad and whether the color was right with just a glance. If you said too much, she would get annoyed. Her pair of intelligent cat eyes would faintly glance at you, making you feel so guilty that you wished you could dig a hole in the ground and hide. As such, the cloth supplied to Marquis Yonla was of the highest quality. She didn't dare to mix in the slightest bit of fake cloth. After Wuxia inspected all the cloth, she threw a matching card to the shopkeeper and said indifferently, "Go to the accounts room and withdraw some money. If there's any new jewelry, send someone to bring it over for me to take a look. You won't lose out on the price. Remember, it has to be the most original. I, Wuxia, don't rarely wear things that others have worn before." The shopkeeper picked up the matching card and repeatedly agreed. After she happily walked away, Wuxia softly said, "Xianger, you also know that I should look at other people. I just happen to need a few sets of clothes and a few sets of hair ornaments. Can you support older sister for a while? In the future, older sister definitely won't forget your good deeds." When she said this, she felt extremely humiliated and resentful. However, for the sake of her future life of luxury, glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, she had no choice but to endure. She didn't know how much this bastard child had fed old ancestor and big brother that they had even handed over their family property. When the real Wuxia returned home in the future, she didn't know how bitterly disappointed and wronged she would feel. It was a pity that when she married to Yangzhou, she wouldn't be able to see the "pheasant fell from the phoenix tree" show. When she thought of this, the corners of Wuxia's mouth slightly hooked up. Wuxia pulled open a piece of cloth and examined it under the sunlight. When she heard this, she faintly glanced at her and said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "What can you do if you buy a few more sets of clothes and hair ornaments? You look beautiful on the outside, but you're an idiot on the inside. Even if I let you marry into a rich and powerful family, you won't be able to play around. Sooner or later, you'll end up alone in your boudoir. I've already told you that you should study more when you're free, but you're good. You accepted the task and didn't do it with all your heart. Instead, you made people dig a hole for me. You also don't know how much weight you have. You're still too inexperienced to play mind games with me. As long as you're willing to put in the effort, you only need to learn a little bit from me and it'll be enough for you to enjoy for the rest of your life. You want to marry so much that you've gone crazy. You didn't investigate the Fang family's situation clearly before you planted your head in it. Who in charge of salt administration is clean? Recently, the emperor has repeatedly checked the national treasury. Salt transportation is the most important thing. Other people are hurriedly picking it out, but you can't wait to jump in. If you drag older brother down, don't blame me for not recognizing my own family." She took a sip of hot tea and continued to scold, "You don't learn what you should learn, you don't understand what you should understand, you don't ask what you should ask, and you're wholeheartedly thinking about crooked ways. I think that not only do you need to tidy up your face, you also need to tidy up your brain." Wuxia was scolded until she couldn't raise her head. When she heard the surrounding maidservants trying to hold back their laughter, she wished that she could pounce on her and tear apart that extremely vicious mouth of hers. As for what she said, she didn't take it to heart at all. She only treated it as if she couldn't bear to see her doing well. In the end, the senior servant in charge had more experience. She knew that although second Miss's words weren't pleasant to hear, they were all on point. If eldest Miss became alert because of this, she would be able to benefit for the rest of her life. However, eldest Miss was a blockhead and couldn't understand. They were both sisters, but when it came to intelligence, one was like the sky while the other was like the earth. Yu's personal maidservant had a bad temper. She couldn't help but raise her head slightly and glare at her with a venomous gaze. Yu Xiang paused in her teacup, picked up the horsewhip, and pressed it against her chin. She raised her eyebrows and said, "What's with that look? You're not convinced?" In this Marquis Yongle, who would dare to oppose second miss? After being whipped by her, regardless of whether or not you made a mistake, or whether or not you were in the right, Master Ho would immediately punish you with 50 strokes of the cane before throwing you out. That maidservant trembled and hurriedly knelt down to admit her mistake. Yu Xiang ignored her and looked at Yu cautiously as she warned, "Whether you want spring clothes or head ornaments, I'll give them to you. It doesn't matter how expensive they are. I only have one request for you, don't drag my older brother down. Otherwise, I'll let you live the rest of your life in hunger and cold, without clothes to cover your body. Do you believe me?" She raised her chin and stared at the young girl in front of her with her large and bright cat eyes. Hidden in the depths of her eyes was an innocent yet cruel light. Yu unconsciously took a few steps back and said in a trembling voice, "Younger sister, your words are too serious. How can I make the decision on the marriage? It's all based on old ancestors' words. It's good that you know. I'm just afraid that you'll take things too hard and throw yourself into my arms. Isn't that so shameful?" Her slightly narrowed cat eyes instantly opened, and her smile was clear and bright. She was extremely adorable. "All right, you can leave now. I'll send someone to send the cloth and jewelry over at 5 p.m. Since you've taken my things, you have to abide by my rules." Yu nodded and left one foot at a time. These words were quickly passed on to the matriarch by the steward. The matriarch smiled and sighed as she trimmed the potted plants. "With Xiang at home, what do I have to worry about? If Yu could learn even the slightest bit of Xiang's intelligence, I wouldn't have let her live until now. Marry into a noble family." She didn't even think about how the emperor would be willing to see our marquis household and the aristocratic families join hands with each other based on Yandere's position at court. If she wants to enter a noble family, I'm afraid she won't be able to in this lifetime. Yu Pinyin was currently entertaining Fang Zhichen in the front yard. The two of them sat across from each other in the pavilion in the middle of the lake. On the short table were several plates of delicious dishes. The spring breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of flowers and trees. It was quite intoxicating. Fang Zhichen secretly sized up Marquis Yongle's handsome face. He wanted to propose a toast, but he didn't dare to act rashly. The other party's temperament was so cold that even the warm sunlight couldn't penetrate it. The maidservants pretended to be in a hurry as they passed by the lakeside. They turned into a small path and immediately hid behind the rockery. They admired Fang Zhichen's unusually handsome face through the hole and occasionally laughed in a low voice. Fang Zhichen was a weak scholar and naturally couldn't hear them. However, Yu Pinyin heard them clearly. His sharp gaze swept across his face and then he said in a low voice, "Since you're here to prepare for the exam, you should stay in your room and study. Don't go to the backyard as you wish." If he accidentally bumped into Xiang, he would have no choice but to chase the mother and son out. "Don't I need to pay respects to the old madam every day?" Fang Zhichen's face was slightly pale. He secretly wondered how he had offended Marquis Yongle. No need. Old madam has to recite Buddhist scriptures and copy scriptures every day. Don't disturb her peace. If there's anything, send someone to the front yard to inform her. Naturally, someone will help you deal with it. Fang Zhichen repeatedly agreed. He deeply felt that the rumors were true. This Marquis Yongle was really a jade-faced king of hell. Sitting across from him was like being in a world of ice and snow, without a trace of human life. The author has something to say, "Thank you to my cute little creatures, and also thank you to all the friends who supported the original version. Moi. Because you guys are too generous, the list can't contain one chapter. Therefore, I'm posting it in batches to avoid wasting the mobile reader's data. Chapter 31. Yu Xiang took a short nap. When she woke up, she looked at her faded nails and ordered Tao Hong to make some balsamine juice for her. Put more rose essential oil in it. After you dye your nails, it'll leave a faint fragrance. This way, you'll look elegant with a flick of your sleeves. Tao Hong complied and took out a small bowl. He placed balsamine and alum in it and carefully stirred it. Lulu lifted the curtain and entered with a large brocade box. She reported, "Miss, the shopkeeper has delivered the spring clothes and head ornaments. Do you want to choose first, or do you want to send them to eldest miss as they are?" "Send them to her. I'm sure she's craning her neck to look at the door right now." Yu Xiang leaned against the headboard. Her light smock slipped off her shoulders, revealing half of her snow-white arm. A small tube top outlined her exquisite figure. "The spring weather is chilly. It's warm and cold. Miss, you should wear more." Lulu put down the brocade box and added another layer of clothing for her. She then took out her silky black hair and slowly combed it with a fine-toothed comb. After tidying it up neatly, she ordered 2 maidservants to carry her to the dressing table and sit down. Yu Xiang lazily lay on the table, her fingertips fiddling with the red tassel string on the brocade box. She slowly opened her mouth. "When you go, properly instruct the Chiu clan to keep a close eye on Wuxia. If Wuxia dares to do anything out of line, regardless of whether she offends her superiors or disrespects her seniors, tie her up first. That brain of hers, even if I beat it with a mace, she won't listen to half a word. She'll think that I'm jealous of her and can't bear to see her living well. If she has any evil intentions, she'll definitely walk the path to the end and refuse to give up until she sees the coffin. If it weren't for the fact that I'm afraid she'll burden older brother, I wouldn't care if she's dead or alive. I'll just let her jump into the fire pit." Lulu listened and nodded in agreement. She saw that her mistress' hair was too smooth and couldn't be tied into a bun. She could only wet it with osmanthus oil and use a few silver hairpins to fix it into a butterfly shape. Yu Xiang looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror and waved his hand in satisfaction. "All right, go quickly." Tao Hong crushed the balsamine and poured the flower juice mixed with alum and rose essential oil into a small bowl. He then soaked it with a ball of cotton. Seeing that Miss was bored to death, he picked a topic and said, "Miss, that young master of the Fong family is really handsome." "Oh. How so?" Yu Xiang turned to look at her. "His skin is very white, his eyebrows are very handsome, and his nose." Tao Hong said as he used a small pair of tweezers to roll the cotton into a fingernail-sized ball. He carefully placed it on his master's fingertips and then wrapped it with a cloth. While he was talking enthusiastically, Ah Lu, the big parrot hanging under the porch, shouted at the top of its voice, "Master Ho is here. Master Ho is here." Tao Hong hurriedly shut up, but it was too late. Yu Pinyin walked in expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, "For the next month, no one is allowed to step into the front yard. Those who violate the rules will go to the housekeeper and receive 30 strokes of the cane." Tao Hong trembled with fear as he agreed. Yu Xiang pursed her lips and smiled. "Brother, is that young master of the Fong family really that handsome?" "He's just a so-so." Yu Pinyin's cold and hard face became even more displeased. He walked behind his sister, pressed her shoulder, and whispered into her ear, "Did his mother say anything today? Isn't it just some small family matters? But looking at her, it seems that she wants Wuxia to be her daughter-in-law. You also know that the Fong family is rich and wealthy. Wuxia is probably very beautiful right now." Yu Xiang gently blew the balsam flower juice on her fingernails. A unique fragrance instantly spread in the air, making people intoxicated. Yu Pinyin buried his face in his sister's neck and took a deep breath. Only then did he sit down beside her. He took the small tweezers from Tao Hong's hand and began to dye his sister's fingernails. His movements were very practiced. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have imagined that the general of agile cavalry, who was invincible on the battlefield, could have such a tender side to him. The Fong family looks beautiful now, but in fact, it's already in the midst of a raging fire. It doesn't have much time left. As for you Siu, you have to give her a good beating. Don't let her drag me down with her, Marquis Yongla. You too, don't just listen to people talking about how handsome you are and think. Seeing that her brother was about to start talking endlessly again, Yu Xiang hurriedly put her free hand around his neck. The corners of her lips curled up, and she said fawningly, I know. No matter how handsome he is, how can he compare to my brother? The stranger is like jade, and the young master is unparalleled. In this world, you won't be able to find a husband as handsome as my brother. Moreover, my brother is invincible and invincible. You're my Han dynasty's unparalleled hero. If I want to marry, I must marry someone like my brother. Those ordinary people simply can't enter my eyes. She blinked her sparkling cat eyes and chuckled, however, I'm afraid that there isn't a man more outstanding than my brother in this world. Therefore, I'm destined to never be able to marry in this lifetime. Brother, you have to support me. She moved closer and used the tip of her nose to touch Yu Pinyan's nose. The warm lotus fragrance was intoxicating. Yu Pinyan's gaze became absent-minded for a moment. His cold and hard face slowly softened, and he said in a low voice, there's no need for you to mention it. Brother will naturally support you for the rest of your life. What did you eat tonight? White-cut chicken, rui fish rolls, dragon whiskers, steamed mandarin fish. Yu Xiang listed out one by one. You only ate these? I thought you drank a large barrel of honey. That's why your little mouth is so sweet. Yu Pinyan rubbed her full lips. His eyes revealed a strong and gentle smile. I didn't eat the honey, but I ate a bit of this. Yu Xiang lifted the lid of a small tortoiseshell box on the table. She dipped her finger in a bright red honey-like substance and gently smeared it on her lower lip. She then stuck out her pink tongue and licked it. She smiled and said, I made this lipstick myself. I added rose petals with a bit of beeswax and a bit of lard before mashing them together. Once they're dried, you can use them. People say that, before you move your lips, smell the lipstick. Brother, smell it. Isn't it very fragrant? She chuckled as she dipped her finger in another layer of lipstick. She first placed it on Yu Pinyan's nose for him to smell, then suddenly changed the direction of her lipstick and smeared it on his lips. Yu Pinyan had been on the battlefield since he was 16 years old. How could he not see through her little tricks? However, he allowed her to fool around. He waited for her to dye her lips red before he narrowed his eyes to admire her increasingly brilliant smile. Brother, isn't it very fragrant and sweet? She blinked her eyes. Yu Pinyan stuck out the tip of his tongue and licked it. A faint sweetness filled his mouth. His already deep and handsome facial features looked even more devilish because of the red lipstick. Yu Xiang stared in a daze. At the same time, Yu Pinyan's gaze was also unable to move away from his sister's bright and full lips. They were like ripe cherry-red lips. He slowly moved closer. His nose was filled with the fragrance of roses mixed with lotus flowers. Suddenly, half of an ambiguous poem appeared in his mind, gorgeous makeup powder, fragrant lipstick mess up the lipstick. His mouth was unbearably dry and thirsty. He wished that he could fiercely swallow those tender and beautiful diamond-shaped lips into his stomach. His heart trembled slightly. He hurriedly distanced himself and pretended that nothing had happened. He picked up a ball of cotton and placed it on his sister's fingertips. After wrapping it in a towel, he found an excuse and hurriedly left. Yu Xiang was completely unaware. He instructed Tao Hong to continue painting his nails. Tai Chui Yuan. The Pei clan's long-awaited half-drunk son finally returned. She hurriedly took small steps forward to support him. "Quickly wipe your face," she twisted a towel and placed it on her son's face. She eagerly asked, "Have you become friends with Marquis Yongle?" Feng Jichen lay on the couch and panted for a while. When his head was no longer so dizzy, he said dejectedly, "He's as cold as the rumors say. He's very difficult to get close to. When I offered him wine, he directly refused. When I spoke to him, he ignored me. He also didn't allow me to walk around the Marquis household. In order to alleviate the awkwardness, I had to pour myself a drink and accidentally drank too much. He's actually so unreasonable." The Pei clan was slightly angry when they heard this. However, they also knew that it wasn't easy for them to successfully move into the family U. The soldiers standing outside the door with swords and halberds, and the patrolling guards who frequently walked by with serious expressions, made her heart tremble and her legs go soft. She had originally thought that her husband's family was already wealthy enough, but compared to the Yu family, she realized that wealth was just a facade that could be broken with a single poke. Only the Yu family, which was as strict and majestic as the Yu family, could truly be called an aristocratic family. She clicked her tongue for a while. Only then did she remember to give her son a hangover soup. She warned, "He's the commander-in-chief, the king of hell that you can't provoke in the entire Han dynasty. It's normal for him to have a bit of a temper. Bear with it for a while." She helped her son up and continued, "Today, I met with the two young misses of the Marquis household. I want to settle down with the eldest concubine's daughter. What do you think?" Feng Jichen immediately sobered up. He questioned, "Why the eldest concubine's daughter? When I become the Zhuanyuan, not to mention the legitimate daughter of a wealthy family, I can even marry a princess of the current dynasty. Why must I marry a concubine's daughter? Mother, you're humiliating your son. Isn't mother out of options?" The Pei clan's face was bitter. "The emperor is now strictly investigating the state treasury, especially the salt policy. I don't know what kind of stormy waves will be set off. Your father has even prepared for his funeral. In the entire dynasty, only the commander-in-chief can save him. Only by getting married will your father have a way to live. Doesn't his family have a legitimate daughter?" Feng Jichen was still dissatisfied. "You only know one thing but not the other. His family does have a legitimate daughter, but she's a cripple and can't walk. If you marry her, who will be in charge of the family for you? Who will be in charge of the family for you? It might even be difficult for you to have children. Therefore, I settled for the second best and settled on a concubine's daughter." The Pei clan's face was full of pity. They didn't think about how their family was ranked among the century-old aristocratic families in the capital. It was also because he was dazzled by the ostentatious clamor of Yangzhou, and was flattered by the salt merchants until he was somewhat on cloud nine. When he entered the capital, his head, which was raised to the sky, could not be lowered. He always thought that his son was a talent in managing the world, 1 in 10,000, and that the girls of other families had to be picked and chosen by him. Feng Jichen thought about the predicament his father was in. Sure enough, only the commander-in-chief, who was above the 3 departments, could save him. He could only swallow the humiliation and nod. Son will listen to mother. Just one thing. Before the engagement, find a chance to meet this family, you eldest Mississippi. The Pei clan happily patted her son's head and smiled. Of course. Although this family, you eldest miss, is a concubine's daughter, she grew up by her legitimate mother's side. Her appearance and bearing are not bad. You will definitely be satisfied. The mother and son discussed for a while and decided on the marriage. After the court examination, he would be the top scorer and would go to the Marquis household to propose marriage. The author has something to say: "Thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi." Chapter 32. A month later, as expected, Fang Jichen passed the exam. However, he was not the top scorer, but the third. The top scorer was from Lingnan. His surname was Shen and his name was Yuanqi. In terms of appearance, he was even more handsome than the third. When he was paraded through the streets, he was almost drowned by the flowers thrown at him by passers-by. However, what was even more impressive was his talent. The emperor gasped in admiration at his incisive words, his original arguments, and his insightful policy treatise. He claimed that this was the most outstanding dossier he had ever read since he ascended the throne. Thereupon he invited several great scholars of the present age to take turns at the Qianglin banquet to sound him out. The top scorer was neither servile nor overbearing, neither in a hurry. He refuted the scholars until they were speechless and ashamed of their inferiority. Not only was he talented, but he was also good at conducting himself. With just a few words, he smoothed things over, making the emperor very happy and praising him endlessly. The second and third place finishers were also outstanding talents of the present age, but in comparison to him, they seemed to be overshadowed. After the banquet, the emperor kept the top scorer for a long talk through the night. The next day, he transferred him to the Hanlin Academy as an attendant scholar. Unexpectedly, he was promoted to a fifth-rank official in the capital. It was obvious that he was favored by the emperor. Not to mention how various forces were trying to win over the top scorer, the annual ceremony was going to be held at the Baiyun Taoist Temple. This was a big event in the capital. Whether it was high officials, nobles, or commoners, they would all go to the Taoist temple to hold a sacrificial ceremony to pray for a bumper harvest and favorable weather in the new year. Although the emperor and empress could not come in person, they would send servants to deliver offerings to the temple. The 10-day celebration would attract everyone in the capital. Marquis Yongle, West Wing Courtyard. Ah Lu, standing on a golden frame, saw the handsome young man striding over. She flapped her wings and shouted, "Master Ho is here, Master Ho is here." While walking, Yu Pinyin flicked a peanut into its mouth. Only then did it stop its loud and rough voice, which sounded like a broken bellows. Tao Hong and Lu Lu had just finished changing their master's clothes and were kneeling to tidy up her skirt. The young girl was wearing a fiery red silk dress that trailed along the ground, and a light transparent mermaid overshirt draped over her shoulders. The rich colors of her dress were not covered by the overshirt, and instead added to her mysteriousness. She dismissed the two maidservants and picked up a fine brush to draw her eyebrows. When she heard Ah Lu's noisy voice, she turned her eyes and looked over. She lazily said, "Older brother, wait for me. I'm still early." Every time his younger sister went out, she would spend at least an hour dressing up. Yu Pinyin had long been accustomed to this. He sat by her side and drank tea, his dark eyes never leaving her fair and delicate face. Yu Xiang dipped some charcoal powder and carefully smeared it along the direction of her eyebrows. After deliberately thickening and darkening it, she gently drew it up at the end of her eyebrows. Her face, which was already beautiful and dazzling, immediately looked extremely fierce. She looked left and right in front of the bronze mirror and changed a few places. Then, she raised her eyebrows and smiled proudly at her brother. "See. This is called the unibrow blade style. Does it feel very fierce? This is exactly the effect I want." She then dyed the ends of her eyes with a weasel brush and hooked it. Her round and big cat eyes became even brighter. Then, she squinted slightly and looked at her brother. "Look at me. Do you feel that your heart is trembling and panicking? You don't even dare to come forward and talk to me. Those talkative girls always laugh at me behind my back. I want to crush them in terms of appearance. I want to make them feel ashamed and take a detour." Hearing this, Yu Pinyin's chaotic heartbeat gradually calmed down. He felt both funny and sympathetic. He tapped the tip of her nose and said, "That's right. Just your face alone can make them die of beauty. Not only do they die of beauty, but I'm also almost dead of beauty when I look at myself in the mirror. Yu Xiang turned her face in front of the mirror. Yu Pinyin put down his teacup. He laughed and pinched her cheeks. He joked, "Let me see how thick my little Xiang's skin is. I'm afraid that even a crossbow arrow might not be able to pierce through it." Yu Xiang shook her head left and right to avoid him. The brother and sister pair instantly became a mess. After a quarter of an hour, Yu Xiang laughed and fell into her brother's arms. She said angrily, "Stop fooling around. We won't be able to make it in time for the ritual. I haven't put on lipstick yet." Yu Pinyin let go of her soft cheeks and smeared some lipstick on her face. After that, he pinched her chin and admired it for a long time. Then, he put her down and carried her into the wheelchair. Yu Xiang saw that he didn't push her out of the door. Instead, he turned around and went to the cubicle. She called out warily, "What are you doing?" The old ancestor must be waiting anxiously. Yu Pinyin smiled but didn't say anything. He held a wet handkerchief in his hand and wiped off the makeup that she had painstakingly applied for more than an hour. He smiled and said, "It's fine if you're so beautiful that you die of it. Don't harm others." There were too many people at the ritual. He didn't want his precious little sister to be seen by other men. "At least put a flower ornament on my forehead." Yu Xiang made a last-ditch effort. Yu Pinyin rummaged through her makeup box and found the simplest flower ornament that looked like a cinnabar mole. He stuck it between her eyebrows and urged, "It's done. Let's go. How about the lotus-shaped one? It's not that eye-catching." Yu Xiang tugged on his sleeve. Yu Pinyin didn't answer. He bent down and peeled off the cinnabar mole between her eyebrows. She hurriedly hid her face in his arms and shouted, "It's done, it's done. It's done. Brother, let's go quickly." Yu Pinyin hugged her shoulders and chuckled. Although the old lady believed in Buddhism, an annual event like the tea gathering was a good opportunity to visit her old friends. Naturally, she couldn't miss it. At this time, she had already dressed up and was sitting in the hall drinking tea. When she saw her granddaughter, who was wearing no makeup and looking listless, she smiled and said, "Oh, did your brother wash off your makeup again? Isn't that so? It's always like this at a larger gathering. How can I face others?" Yu Xiang sighed. The matriarch laughed even harder. She pinched the tip of her nose and said, "If you don't have the face to see others, how will all the noble maidens in the capital deal with themselves? You have to leave a way out for others." She wasn't boasting, but her granddaughter's appearance was one of the best in the entire Great Han dynasty. If she hadn't tragically lost her legs, the iceman who came to propose marriage would have trampled down the Marquis household steps. Yu Pinyin warmly agreed, "Old ancestor is right. That's why I always tell her not to harm others. It's enough for her to harm only me." These words sounded a little strange, but the matriarch didn't think much of it. Mama Ma came in with a red envelope and reported, "The old lady, this is the marriage proposal from the Fong clan. Do you want to take a look?" The matriarch waved her hand carelessly, "What's there to look at? Anyway, it's going to be rejected. Have you made arrangements with the monastery head?" After Fong Jichen came in third place in the high school, the Pei clan arranged a meeting with Yu. Both sides were very satisfied, and not long after, the iceman came to propose marriage. Because the matriarch and the Pei clan's mother were old friends for decades, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were as close as sisters. Even if she wanted to refuse, she couldn't make it too obvious. Therefore, she asked her to send the marriage proposal first. When the time came, she would just say that the two of them didn't match. "We've already discussed it. These two characters definitely won't match. It's a pity that such a good marriage would be ruined." Mama Ma sighed as she put the marriage proposal into her sleeve. The two of them weren't playing a game of riddles. After a little thought, one would know what they were talking about. Yu, who arrived late because of her meticulous makeup, happened to hear the whole story. The joy on her face disappeared. Wan Qiu held the curtain open for her for a while, but she didn't move. He reminded her, "Eldest miss, the old lady is only waiting for you." Yu seemed to wake up from a dream. Her footsteps were weak as she walked in. Old Madame Furin saw her expression as if she had lost her parents and naturally knew that she had hurt her, but she did not explain the reason, nor did she open her mouth to comfort her. As long as she had a bit of brain, she would know that the Fang family was definitely not a rich village, but a cemetery of peace and happiness, where people died without knowing why. "Since everyone is here, let's go." She waved her hand lightly. Yu nodded and lowered her head slightly to hide her resentful expression. The Baiyin Taoist temple was indeed crowded. Fortunately, the temple master had already prepared the most comfortable accommodations for the officials and nobles. Yu Pinyin was in charge of the temple's defense. After sending her grandmother and sister to the side room, she hurriedly left. The three of them rested for a while, took the offerings, and went straight to the Lei Zhu temple. Outside the temple stood 2 rows of dragon-scale guards with swords and halberds. The formation was strict. Someone who could make the dragon-scale guards personally protect must have an extraordinary identity. There was an 80 to 90% chance that he or she was a member of the imperial family. The matriarch stood in place and hesitated for a moment before turning to leave. An old mama came out with 2 sticks of incense and inserted them into the large bronze cauldrons on both sides of the temple door. Seeing the 3 of them, she hurriedly greeted them. The matriarch looked back and saw that it was the crown princess wet nurse, Songshi. She immediately showed a surprised expression. "So it's Songshi. The noble person inside is actually the crown princess. Isn't her highness?" Song Mama gave her a look and mouthed silently, "I just want peace of mind." The matriarch nodded in agreement. The crown princess had been married to the crown prince for more than 6 years, but she had never given birth. This year, she finally became pregnant, but she was pregnant with twins. If she gave birth to 2 boys, one would have to go. It was fine if one didn't go, but both would be stripped of their inheritance rights. If she gave birth to 2 girls, the birth of twins would be difficult and dangerous. Who knew if it would damage their bones and make it difficult to conceive in the future? The best-case scenario was a boy and a girl, a dragon and a phoenix. But twins were difficult to raise. It was fine if both children were safe, but if the dragon died and the phoenix was born, then the emperor and the crown prince's faces would be good. Reality was worse than speculation. The crown prince's concubine had already given birth to the crown prince's eldest concubine, and that concubine was the empress dowager's grandniece. Her family background could only be higher than the crown princess. If the crown prince consort could not keep a healthy baby boy in this pregnancy, her future could be said to be uncertain and extremely dangerous. No wonder she insisted on coming to the Taoist temple to pray after being pregnant for 7 months. She was eager to have a child. The matriarch gestured at her belly and asked, "Is it all right?" Songshi nodded. The imperial physician said that the fetus is very stable. "It's fine to come out and pray." Just as the 2 were talking, the crown princess heard the noise and walked out. When she saw Yu Xiang, she was very happy and waved, "Xiang, come here quickly." Lu of Tao Hong hurriedly pushed Yu Xiang forward to greet. Yu, who was ignored, felt resentful and humiliated. She could only stand stiffly in place and bow. The crown princess grasped Yu Xiang's white wrist and smiled at the matriarch. "Old Yu matriarch, your granddaughter is famous for being intelligent. Can she borrow Ben Gong's good fortune?" Nyang is too kind. In terms of good fortune, how can she compare to you?" The matriarch hurriedly waved her hand. The crown princess smiled but didn't say anything. She pulled Yu Xiang into the hall and pointed at a bamboo tube. "Ben Gong has been standing here for half an hour, but Ben Gong doesn't dare to reach out to draw. Xiang, help Ben Gong draw one. Whether it's good or bad, Ben Gong won't blame you. When Yu Xiang heard this, her scalp went numb. Even if she said she wouldn't blame her, who would be able to maintain a calm attitude if she really drew the worst lot? She would more or less mind. However, the crown princess was the monarch, and she was the subject. This was an era where, if the monarch wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. Yu Xiang had no choice. She closed her eyes and prayed for a moment. Then, she decisively drew one and handed it to the crown princess, who was full of hope. The matriarch didn't show it on her face, but her heart was in her throat. She was afraid that her granddaughter would draw the worst lot and cause the crown princess to hold a grudge. The author has something to say: thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Mwax. What I'm talking about is starting next week. My second wife passed away this week, so the family has been rather busy. I'm really sorry. Love Chin Yu through a landmine report time Feng Gua through a landmine report time and EC through a grenade report time S through a landmine report time Hua Yazi through a grenade report time Air Bao YY 0 through a grenade report time Buffong 1 through a landmine report time Throw a landmine report time Ye through a landmine report time Lien Kai Bingti through a landmine report time Shi through a landmine report time Buggy. In the book through a landmine report time E. Leslie through a landmine report time Shi through a landmine report time Love Ching Yu through a grenade report time Luo Shiba through a landmine report time New Old Dream through a landmine report time Luo Shiba through a landmine report time I'm a Rice Bug. Chapter 33. The Crown Princess had been having a hard time recently. If she had married into an ordinary family, it would have been a great thing to have twins. But she had married into the royal family, so the situation was the complete opposite. Giving birth to 2 sons was considered bad luck. Giving birth to 2 daughters was considered bad luck. Giving birth to 1 son and 1 daughter was a great auspicious sign, but there were hidden dangers. The birth of a dragon and the death of a phoenix were considered bad luck. The birth of a dragon and the death of a phoenix were considered bad luck. Only when the twins were safe could it be considered stable. After thinking about it, it was better to have only 1 child. It was a 50-50 chance, so there was no need to worry so much. What made her even more anxious was that the crown prince only had 1 son in the 6 years she had married into the Eastern Palace. Compared to the other princes who had many children, it was really pitiful. The emperor valued the concubine very much. The crown prince's lack of a legitimate son had always been his sore point, so he was more and more dissatisfied with the crown princess these years. In addition, vice-concubine Su's ambition grew. During her pregnancy, she frequently spread rumors to disturb her mind. Several sisters-in-law also secretly tried to trip her up and make her abort the baby. It was difficult to describe the dangers. Although the crown princess acted calmly, she could not stand it anymore. That was why she went to the Taoist temple to pray. After delivering the offerings, she stood in front of the lot pot for half an hour, not daring to reach out for it. She could only call Yu Xiang in. It was fine if she drew the good lot, but if she drew the bad lot, she could comfort herself that it was someone else who drew it and had nothing to do with her. After taking the lot, her fingertips trembled slightly. She handed it to the Taoist temple without looking at it. The Taoist temple made a sound of surprise. She straightened her back and asked, "Is the lot bad?" The old lady held the Buddha beads and silently chanted, Amitabha. Suddenly, she remembered that this was a Taoist temple. She quickly apologized and changed it to, Immeasurable God. Yu Xiu's eyes flashed. She was just waiting to see Yu Xiang's bad luck. She was still willing to get involved in this kind of situation where she could not get anything good out of it. It was obvious that her intelligence and ability were all flattered by her ancestor and brother. The Taoist temple looked at it carefully for a moment, then smiled and waved his hand. No, I have to congratulate the Crown Princess. You have drawn the only lot of the dragon and phoenix lot. Crown Princess, please take a look. Then he presented the lot with both hands. The Crown Princess took a closer look and saw that the signature was marked with a dragon and a phoenix connected from top to bottom. There were only 2 lines on the signature, the bamboo transformed into a dragon and a phoenix that entered the sky. The light of the Tao scattered all evil. The meaning behind this was obvious. Yu Xiang waved her hand. It's not that I'm blessed. It's that the deities are borrowing my hand to bless you. In the end, it's all thanks to your good fortune. Jiu is also here. She is sleeping in the wing room at the back of the hall. Take her out for a walk so that she won't sleep for the whole day. The Crown Princess smiled. Yu Xiang nodded, then walked to the back hall under the guidance of 2 palace servants. The old madam heaved a sigh of relief. Xiang was indeed a lucky star. Her luck was truly extraordinary. After chatting with the Crown Princess for a while and paying respects to the lightning ancestor in the hall, she finally left with Yusiyu, who was full of worries. Although the scale of the White Cloud Taoist Temple could not be compared to the Zhenghua Temple, it still occupied an entire mountain. There was a naturally formed lake at the top of the mountain. The green lake reflected the light blue sky and the bright sun. The scenery was truly beautiful. The lakeside was the most quiet and secluded place. Therefore, the Taoist temple specially built a 2-story high tea room. Next to the tea room were several small pavilions. Whether it was drinking tea or boating, it was the best place to go. When the scenery was good, more people went. When Yu Xiang brought the 9th princess and Fan Jiaojiao to the tea room, the seats by the window on the 2nd floor were already full. Only a small table at the stairs was empty. The 9th princess was 12 years old and would soon be 13. She had grown taller and her face had also matured. Although she was not as beautiful as Yu Xiang, she was still pretty and cute. In addition, she had an outstanding noble aura. As long as she did not say anything stupid, she would be able to intimidate people. Fan Jiaojiao was the youngest of the 3, but she was also the strongest. She had thick eyebrows and big eyes and a snake tail whip at her waist. If anyone dared to be disrespectful to the 9th princess, she would whip them without another word. The noble ladies in the capital gave her the nickname, Thug Show. When she heard it, she was not ashamed but proud. Because there were many people in the Taoist temple, the Taoist temple gave the tea room to the female guests to prevent them from offending the noble guests. The small pavilions by the lake were used to entertain the male guests. The Taoist child wiped the table with a rag and invited the 3 to sit. The 9th princess pointed to the window and said, "I want to sit there." The legendary Zhuang Yuan was actually that downtrodden young master who had attempted to commit suicide by crashing into a carriage. In just 2 short months, he really had made a meteoric rise. After a few glances, her attention was attracted by the tall figure with his back to the tea room. If the scholars were compared to green bamboos, that figure was like a pine tree. Moreover, it was the cloud-soaring pine tree that had taken root at the top of a cliff. It had a persevering and heroic bearing. He didn't need to show his face. In Yu Xiang's eyes, he was the most special existence. The laughter of the noble ladies attracted the attention of the youths by the lake. Although they didn't show it on their faces, they were slightly proud. The volume of their recitations unconsciously increased. Only that person turned a deaf ear to it and turned a blind eye to it. He only placed his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist. His back was straight, and one could vaguely see the strong and tense muscles hidden under the official's robe. Yu Xiang stared at him for a long time. Seeing that he didn't notice her, her eyes turned. She took out a few red beans from her pouch and threw them at him. Then, she immediately bent down and hid under the windowsill. There was the sound of something breaking through the air. Yu Pinyin quickly dodged. He looked down and saw that it was a few red beans. He turned to look at the tea room and found that the ninth princess was holding half a pastry in her mouth and staring foolishly at Shen Yuanqi. Fan Jiaojiao waved her hand at him and winked at him. He didn't know what she was trying to say. Yu Pinyin raised his eyebrows and pretended not to care. He turned around and continued to stare at the disguised crown prince in the pavilion. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and snickered. Then, she took out a few more red beans and threw them at him. However, she found that her brother quickly turned around and glanced at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. He silently reprimanded her, naughty again. Yu Xiang leaned against the windowsill and sent him a proud look. She already looked like a painting, and her head was shrouded in the splendid light of spring. The cinnabar between her eyebrows shone brightly, tender and alluring, causing everyone by the lake to raise their heads to look at her, their eyes filled with infatuation. Especially Shen Yuanqi and Fang Jichen. Their eyes almost couldn't move. The joy on Yu Pinyin's face instantly disappeared. He picked up a red bean from the ground and threw it at the window where she was. There was a crisp sound. The bamboo pole supporting the window frame broke and the window fell down heavily. Fortunately, Yu Xiang understood her brother's temperament. When he bent down to pick up the red bean, she hurriedly dodged. She also pulled the ninth princess away from the window. Otherwise, their noses would have been knocked out. Your brother is angry again. Chapter 34. As soon as Fang Jichen returned to the small courtyard where he lived, he hurriedly sent someone to find the Pei clan. The Pei clan came in dejectedly and said, "Son, I'm afraid your marriage with Miss Yu is not going to happen." Fang Jichen's face was filled with anxiety, but when he heard this, he immediately laughed and asked, "Did something happen? Your birth characters are not compatible. They said that it was a forced marriage, and there will be disasters in the future. If it is serious, it will harm your children. Therefore, this marriage is not going to happen. The family Yu has returned the marriage invitation. Mother, why don't you send my marriage invitation back to them? What's there to do? The one who showed you your birth characters is the master of the Baiyun monastery, who is known as a living immortal. He can't be wrong." The Pei clan waved their hands. "Your son wants you to marry the eldest daughter of the family Yu with the marriage invitation." Fang Jichen's ears were so red that they were dripping blood. He stammered, "Your son saw her by the lake just now. I really like her. Mother, please give me your blessings." The Pei clan was happy at first, but then they hesitated. "Son, it's good that you are willing to marry the eldest daughter of the family Yu, but she can't do anything. Who will take care of your backyard? Who will give birth to your children? Who will take care of you? These are all big problems. You can't make decisions on impulse. No matter how beautiful she is, she can't live with it, can she?" Fang Jichen was in a difficult position, but he couldn't forget Yu Xiang's charming face. After thinking for a while, he said, "Mother, let's welcome cousin Yu into the family first. Let her help me take care of my backyard and give birth to my children. Miss Yu can be my wife with peace of mind." If it weren't for the imperial court salt tax inspection, the Pei clan would have ordered their son to marry their niece instead of trying to use his marriage as a bargaining chip. Hearing this, Fang Jichen was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, that's good. Let's do that. I'll write a letter to eldest sister and ask her to prepare as soon as possible." Her brother-in-law from the Pei clan had passed away early, leaving her sister and a daughter of the first wife to lead a difficult life. The Pei clan had a deep relationship with her, so they helped her to buy a house nearby to take care of her. Their niece was also brought back to the family from a young age and raised as their own daughter. Although the two sisters didn't say it explicitly, they both had the intention of getting married. Although she had entered the family as a concubine, Yu Xiang was just a decoration. If she explained it clearly to her sister, she would definitely agree. Feng Jichen thought for a moment and said hesitantly, "Don't. Let's wait until Miss Yu is married before marrying my cousin. Otherwise, family Yu will be unhappy." The members of the Pei clan were unhappy. They sneered, "What right does family Yu have to be unhappy? It is the good fortune of his family that we are willing to take the cripple. You are His Majesty's hand-picked Tanhua. Not only are you brimming with talent and handsome appearance, but you also have a boundless future. Which family's daughter can't you marry? If I am willing to let my good son marry their cripple, their family should be secretly happy." The members of the Pei clan patted their son's shoulder and continued, "Son, don't look at her family's high status. With Yu Xiang's qualifications, I'm afraid that no one will want her in this lifetime. Marrying her is only a temporary measure. In the future, when your father gets out of his predicament and you have a meteoric rise, we can't let a cripple take over the position of the family's matriarch. Because of your situation, I can also submit a letter to the clan elders to fight for the position of a second wife for Qian Er. Once we get her, she will be at our mercy." Feng Jichen felt that his confidence was lacking. He waved his hand and said, "No, no. If Marquis Yongle finds out, he will come knocking on our door. If he wants to ruin Yu Xiang's reputation and make no one dare to marry her in this lifetime, he can just come knocking on our door. Do you think our family will be afraid of him? Don't worry, I've already asked around. He dotes on Yu Xiang very much and protects her like she's his treasure. Once Yu Xiang is in our hands, it means that we have grasped his weakness. Even if he wants to get rid of the rats, he will have to consider the jade bottle, right? When the time comes, whether you want to be stationed in the capital or be promoted or transferred, you can go to him. For the sake of Yu Xiang, there is no reason for him to refuse." The Pei clan's wishful thinking crackled loudly. Feng Jichen thought about it carefully and felt that it was right. A married daughter was like spilled water. If they wanted their daughter to have a good life, shouldn't they treat their son-in-law well? Although Yu Xiang's family was prominent and it wouldn't be difficult for her to divorce, her situation was very different from others. She was a cripple. If she really left the Feng clan, her life would be over and she would only end up alone. With how much Yu Pinyin doted on her, he wouldn't be willing to part with her no matter what. The more the mother and son thought about it, the more they felt that this matter was feasible. They immediately went to find the old madam to exchange marriage notes. Suddenly, they felt that if they were too impatient, it wouldn't look good on them. They could only endure for the time being. On the other hand, Yu Xiu also heard that her great marriage had fallen through. She hated the old madam to the bone. She hid in her room and pondered for half a day before finally coming up with a solution. Yu Xiang didn't know that the mother and son of the Pei clan were already thinking about her. After drinking tea and sending off the 9th princess and Fan Jiaojiao, she let the maidservant push her back leisurely. Seeing that the small courtyard where she lived was almost within reach, a gentle and sweet voice sounded from behind her. "Xiang'er, can I have a word with you?" Yu Xiang turned around to look. She frowned and thought for a moment before hesitantly saying, "Chang Yafu?" It had been 3 years since they last saw each other, and Chang Yafu had grown even more beautiful. However, in front of Yu Xiang, Chang Yafu was no longer beautiful. Her incomparably beautiful face immediately looked a little tacky. Chang Yafu forced a smile and spoke again. "Xiang'er, can I have a word with you?" Yu Xiang could roughly guess what she was going to say. She used her fingertips to touch the corner of her lips and said, "Then let's go." The master and servants followed Chang Yafu to the small courtyard where she lived. However, she was determined not to enter the house for a long chat. She only stopped under the large locust tree in the courtyard and quietly gazed at the misty mountain range in the distance. Her posture was extremely leisurely. Chang Yafu saw that she had no intention of initiating a conversation, so he could only disperse the servants in the courtyard. He also hinted at Yu Xiang's 2 maidservants to stand further away. Tao Hong's Lu stood firm. Chang Yafu looked pleadingly at Yu Xiang. Yu Xiang lazily waved her hand. Only then did the two of them leave. They walked to the entrance of the courtyard and stood on the left and right like two door gods. Their eyes were unblinking as they stared at their master. If you have something to say, just say it. I don't have the time to listen to you beat around the bush. Yu Xiang raised her chin. Chang Yafu originally wanted to exchange a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic, but when he heard this, he hurriedly said, Xianger, I'm going to be removed from the server in a month. You know this too, right? I know. Yu Xiang lowered her head to admire her bright red nails. Can you help me send this letter to your older brother? Back then, it was my father's idea. I'm just a weak woman. How could I make the decision? I could only be manipulated by others. My feelings for your older brother are definitely not fake. After so many misunderstandings, he has to give me a chance to explain. You see, I'm already 19 this year. If he wants to break off the engagement, how would I have the face to see anyone in this lifetime? You're also a girl, so you should be able to understand my difficulties. Back then, older sister let you down. Older sister has long known that she was wrong. Please help older sister this time. When she spoke of her sorrow, Chang Yafu's tears flowed out. With both hands, he presented an exquisite envelope that emitted a fragrance. I'm sorry. The young girl's smile was clearly so charming and moving, but in Chang Yafu's eyes, it was more repulsive than an evil spirit. Although he already knew that her temper was perverse and not easy to deal with, he didn't expect her to use such crude and vicious words to attack him. However, everything she said was the truth, leaving Chang Yafu unable to refute. He only felt that his clothes had been stripped off and his body was exposed in front of everyone's eyes. He had nowhere to hide. But if she didn't look for Yu Xiang, who else would be able to make Yu Pinyin listen to her words? She had no other choice. Chang Yafu blankly held the 5 taels of silver, his fingertips trembling violently. She thought that Yu Pinyin didn't know about the things she did, but it turned out that he knew everything. He was just treating her as a joke. If it was a joke, then it was a joke. It was fine even if he looked at it for a lifetime. She definitely couldn't let the family Yu break off the engagement. Otherwise, the Duke Jinghua Fu's reputation would be ruined and she wouldn't have the face to see anyone again. Moreover, Yu Pinyin currently held the high position of commander in the capital. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his power was monstrous. If she broke off this engagement, where would she go to find a husband more outstanding than Yu Pinyin? Rather than becoming the laughingstock of the entire Great Han dynasty, she would rather become the laughingstock of Marquis Yongle. When she had a firm foothold in the future, she would settle today's humiliation. Yu Xiang could see the strong unwillingness in her eyes, but he didn't think much of it. He waved his hand to call Tao Hong, Lu, over. However, he didn't expect that many insects would suddenly fall from the trees, drenching her head and face. Moreover, a resentful voice came from above, you actually dare to humiliate my older sister like this. I'll let you have a taste of my power. The author has something to say, thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. By the way, happy Singles Day. Don't rush me to update. My family is busy with the funeral. I can't do without you guys this weekend. Chapter 35. Other than butterflies, Yu Xiang was afraid of all kinds of insects, especially those soft insects. Now that she was covered in them, some of them even burrowed into her undergarments through her collar. That feeling was not only frightening, but the hairs on the insects, which were finer than her pores, burrowed into her blood vessels upon contact with her skin, causing a large area of unbearable itchy blisters. Yu Xiang was scared silly. She sat stiffly in her wheelchair, not daring to move. She was afraid that the insects in her hair would also enter her collar when she swayed. Tao Hong, Lulu, quickly, quickly, help me get rid of these insects. Her voice carried a strong sobbing tone. Lulu took out a handkerchief to help the young miss pat the insects. Tao Hong pushed a 12 to 13-year-old youth who had slipped down from the tree to the ground. The youth was Duke Jinggua's only legitimate son, Chang Qi. He had been spoiled since he was a child and was given the nickname of Devil Incarnate. Today, he was holding a pair of bamboo chopsticks in the courtyard to catch insects. He collected a bottle and fed it to his thrush bird. Just as he was about to go down the tree, he saw his older sister bring a cripple in. He was curious and hid in the tree to eavesdrop. When he heard the end, his lungs were about to explode. Marquis Yongla's crippled younger sister also had a bad reputation in the capital. She was crafty, unkind, and had a perverse temperament. When she spoke, her words were as sharp as a knife. Only today did he know that she was even more hateful than the rumors said. Chang Qi opened the bottle and without thinking, poured the entire bottle of insects down. At this time, Tao Hong had pushed her to the ground and scraped her palm, so her hatred became even deeper. She climbed up and kicked Tao Hong over. She still had some sense and did not make a move on Yuxiang. She only picked up the dead branches and leaves on the ground and threw them at her head, cursing that she was unclean. Chang Yafu originally wanted to stop her, but when he saw Yuxiang's pitiful appearance and saw that she was about to cry, he felt great pleasure in his heart. He retreated a few steps and coldly watched from the side. Lulu swatted away the bugs on the outside of her clothes, but she couldn't deal with the bugs inside. She wanted to ask Tao Hong to come over and help push the miss back, but she was repeatedly stopped by Chang Qi, who even kicked her several times. Lulu saw that the situation was not good, so he left his master and Tao Hong and ran out. The bugs crawled in and out of her clothes, and a large number of small blisters appeared on her back. It was very uncomfortable. Yuxiang suppressed the trembling of her body, gritted her teeth, and said, "Chang Yafu, you're still as brainless as before. Based on what you and your brother have done today, don't even think about stepping into my Marquis Yongla in this lifetime." Chang Yafu finally came to his senses. Just as he was about to step forward to stop his younger brother from throwing stones at Yuxiang's head, he saw Yu Pinyin striding over, followed by a sweaty Lulu. Yu Pinyin was known as the jade-faced king of hell. At this moment, his eyes were filled with murderous intent, causing people to retreat. He grabbed Chang Qi by the neck and threw him far away, then looked at his younger sister. He saw that her eyes were closed, and she was biting her lips. Her face was as pale as paper, and there were a few drops of tears on her thick eyelashes. They swayed along with her trembling body. Her head and body were covered with dead branches and leaves, and there were red marks on her forehead from being hit by stones. She looked pitiful and embarrassed. Yu Pinyin's heart fiercely clenched, and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He bent down to carry her, but she pushed him away and said in a trembling voice, "Don't press your hands on my back. It's itchy, painful, and there are a lot of bugs in my underwear." Yu Pinyin gently comforted her, "Big brother knows. I'll take you back now. Don't be afraid, Big brother is here." He hugged his younger sister's slender waist with one hand and supported her buttocks with the other. He carried her into his arms like he was carrying a child, and left with large strides. He didn't even look at Chang Yafu the entire time. Lulu bowed to Chang Yafu and said with a fake smile, "Miss Chang, thank you for taking care of master today. When this servant returns, this servant will definitely report the truth to the old lady and have her personally thank you." After saying this, she pulled Tao Hong and left. Chang Yafu sprinted to the entrance of the courtyard, but the group of people had already left. He didn't know when, but a fine and dense spring rain had drifted down from the sky. When it fell on his skin, it was chilly and chilled his heart. Chang Qi clutched his aching buttocks and angrily said, what kind of plaything is that prefecture you? How dare they treat this heir like this? Sister, don't be sad. I'll definitely have father help us get justice. Chang Yafu looked at him in disbelief for a long time, then suddenly smiled sadly. What kind of plaything is that prefecture you? Let me tell you, even the princes have to show some respect to that plaything. If you don't want father to punish you according to the family rules, then come with me to apologize. Chang Qi refused and reluctantly nodded under Chang Yafu's threats and promises. He left with a belly full of resentment. As soon as Yu Pinyin put his younger sister down, he saw her quickly pull off the pearl hairpin in her hair, untie her hair bun, and constantly scratch the roots of her hair. Following that, she took off her smock, outer robe, and inner clothes. In the blink of an eye, only a small pink dudu was left to wrap around her exquisite body. Although she was only 14 years old, the young girl's body had already developed to perfection. It could be said that if she gained a little weight, she would gain a little weight, and if she lost a little weight, she would lose a little weight. In particular, the 2 round lumps on her chest trembled under her frantic patting, as if they were about to jump out. The already pitiful amount of cloth simply couldn't hide this extremely seductive style. However, she didn't seem to be aware of this. She lifted the dudu and looked inside, then reached behind her to untie the knot. Only then did Yu Pinyin recover from his burning state. He grabbed her hands and placed his large palm on the back of her delicate and smooth neck, pressing this insanely beautiful body into his embrace. The round lumps on her chest were covered, but the soft touch was directly pressed against his chest. There was also a faint but alluring fragrance that lingered around his nose. Yu Pinyin's Adam's apple moved up and down. He completely didn't know what to do with the person in his embrace. It was like hugging a ball of fire in the middle of winter. He knew that he would be burned to death, but he couldn't bear to let go. It was simply too terrible. However, very quickly, his attention was attracted by the large patch of blisters on his younger sister's back. The snow-white skin was covered with red and swollen scars. The scene was truly shocking. His eyes instantly surged with murderous intent. Lulu stood helplessly at the door with the ointment in her hand. She stammered, "Master Ho, let this servant help Miss apply the ointment. Could you please leave for a moment? Although they were brother and sister, you shouldn't be so unrestrained, right?" Tao Hong didn't notice at all. He was busy cleaning up the bugs that had fallen on the bed. Yu Pinyin gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to let go of his younger sister, she hugged his waist and cried out, "Older brother, you have to help me whip Chang Qi to death." And Chang Yafu, she actually allowed her younger brother to bully me. If you marry her in the future, I don't know how you'll torture me. With such a vicious sister-in-law, I don't need to stay at home anymore. Just send me to the country estate. Yu Pinyin's heart felt as if it was being stabbed by a knife. He gently stroked her hair with his fingers. His tone was extremely gentle, but his expression was abnormally cold. "Xiang'er, don't worry. Older brother will definitely teach him a lesson he won't forget. As for Chang Yafu, he can forget about stepping into my Marquis Yongla for the rest of his life." Only then was Yu Xiang satisfied. She sobbed and let go of his hand. Yu Pinyin turned his head away and walked out of the courtyard with stiff steps. He stood in the corridor for a long time. The fire in his heart couldn't be extinguished no matter what. Her voice was loud enough to disperse the thick, dark clouds in the sky. Chang Yafu was also scared out of her wits. She continuously retreated, raised her oil paper umbrella, and jumped and screamed to chase the snakes away. When Yu Xiang heard the commotion, she ordered Tao Hong, Lulu, to carry her to the window to check. She immediately convulsed with laughter. Fortunately, Yu Pinyin didn't kill her. The snakes she found were all non-venomous, so they were only used to scare her. The siblings screamed for half an hour. Seeing that they were about to faint from exhaustion, the two dragon scale guards finally sent someone to pass a message to Duke Jinghua, telling him to come and carry her. It wasn't easy for them to have such a legitimate son. Duke Jinghua and his wife hated that they couldn't keep him in their arms and in their mouths at all times. Seeing their son come back battered and exhausted, with a large pool of urine on his crotch and his hands and feet trembling non-stop, it was obvious that he was scared out of his wits. The husband and wife felt as if their hearts were being cut by a knife. They grabbed their daughter and scolded her. Then, they aggressively went to find old Madame Yu to reason with her. This Yu Pinyin really spoiled Yu Xiang too much. He was so unforgiving even when children were playing around. He was simply unreasonable. The author has something to say: thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 36. When Duke Jinghua and his wife arrived at the small courtyard, the servant girl that Lulu sent to report had just left. The matriarch was currently suppressing a belly full of anger and didn't reveal a trace of a smile. Duchess Jinghua opened her mouth and began to interrogate. I say, old madam, Yu Pinyin is a bit too ungentlemanly. And Yu Xiang bickered and caused a ruckus, yet he actually had someone pour a basket of snakes on Er's body. What is he trying to do? He's a dignified commander-in-chief, so how can he bicker with a brat? The matriarch closed her eyes and twirled her prayer beads. When she finished speaking, she was just about to speak when she saw Yu Pinyin walk in with his half-wet hair. He said in a heavy voice, my younger sister was covered in caterpillars by him. Right now, she's covered in cuts and bruises, and the pain is unbearable. He doesn't have a single wound and was only frightened. I'm already being merciful. If you still don't know what's good for you, be careful that I don't peel off a layer of his skin. Everyone knew that a smiling Marquis Yongle was far more terrifying than an expressionless Marquis Yongle. His expression was as gentle as the spring wind and rain, but in reality, that smile contained a complete disregard for life. Only then did Duke Jinghua vaguely remember that the person in front of him was no longer the destitute brat that could be bullied. Instead, he was the commander-in-chief personally appointed by the emperor. He could kill people above his rank, act first and report later. Of all the civil and military officials in the imperial court, only the emperor could control him. Inside and outside the imperial court, on the battlefield, countless souls died by his hands. If all of them fell into the 9 depths of hell, perhaps even the palace of the king of hell would collapse. Only then did Duke Jinghua know that he was afraid, and his legs trembled. Duchess Jinghua didn't understand the matters of the imperial court and thought that Yu Pinyin was the brat that she could bully. Unexpectedly, she assumed the posture of a mother-in-law and endlessly reprimanded him. Yu Pinyin wasn't in the mood to listen to her finish and sneered, how do you think he and Xiang'er got into a fight? It was Xiang'er who had exposed the matter of Chang Yafu exchanging tokens of love with Yu Pinhong at the Lantern Festival. The siblings had been so angry that they had attacked Xiang'er. Madam, you must be very clear about this matter. Didn't you make an agreement with third aunt in the future? Once third uncle inherits the title and Yu Pinhong becomes the heir apparent, you will come to me to break off the engagement. I've been waiting for you. It's a pity that the heavens play tricks on people. Not long after, third uncle's family was sent to prison. This marriage didn't take place, so they thought of me again. What do you take me for, Yu Pinyin? A good-for-nothing who specializes in picking up used shoes. Duke Jinghua and his wife suddenly opened their eyes wide, as if they had seen a ghost. The old lady accidentally broke the prayer beads and asked anxiously, there's such a thing? Exchanging tokens of love. Good, 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 as expected of my good granddaughter-in-law. So shameless, so lewd. You still have the face to come here and denounce us? Someone, beat them out of here. Hurry up and fight. The old lady stood up and bellowed angrily. She knew that the Chang family wanted to form a marriage alliance with the third branch, but she didn't know that Chang Yafu already had an affair with the third branch's legitimate son. The Chang family actually wanted to shove a piece of trash into his prefecture Yu's hands. What wishful thinking! The servants loudly agreed and went out to look for sticks. If they stayed any longer, they would be beaten and their reputations would be ruined. Duke Jinghua and his wife buried their heads and covered their faces as they ran away. The old lady had a belly full of anger, but she had nowhere to vent it. She slammed the table and asked sternly, "You already knew about this matter. Why didn't you tell me? If I had known that Chang Yafu was so unrestrained, would have broken off the engagement when the old Duke Jinghua hadn't died yet. How could I have tolerated him for so many years? This won't do. Wait until next month, when he's out of service, I'll go and break off the engagement. He's simply going too far." When she thought about how she had almost been persuaded by Duke Jinghua's wife to agree to this marriage, she suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Yu Pinyin gently patted her back and gently said, "I'm telling you now, yet you're still so angry. If I told you back then, wouldn't you have been so angry that you'd be bedridden for a few more months? How could grandson bear to do that?" The old lady's heart ached like it was being twisted, but she also gnashed her teeth in hatred. She pulled on her grandson's hand and wiped away her tears. How much had this child suffered while she was unaware of it? She didn't dare to think too deeply about it. How could his grandfather arrange such a terrible marriage for him? When he went to the Yellow Springs, he would definitely find that old thing to settle this debt. Yu Pinyin smiled slightly as he wiped the old lady's tears. When Xiang Er found out about this, she was even more agitated than the old ancestor. She even took out the dagger he gave her and said that she was going to stab Chang Yafu. It was enough to have two people by his side who treated him wholeheartedly. He had also tempered himself for many years before he truly understood that what should be given up should be decisively given up, and what should be cherished must be firmly grasped. The old lady and her grandson stayed in silence for a while before she felt much better. She saw that his hair was half wet and he had changed his clothes. Just as she was about to ask him why he was taking a bath in this cold weather, a dragon scale guard hastily rushed in and reported, "Commander, the Crown Prince requests your presence." The old lady immediately felt that something was amiss and hurriedly urged her grandson to leave. Meanwhile, the Crown Princess was in a good mood after receiving the dragon phoenix lot that Yu Xiang had drawn. She was resting in a side room in the rear hall when she saw the spring rain outside. Several plum blossoms spat out bright red flower buds that looked especially adorable with water droplets. She ignored the palace maid's attempts to stop her and held up an oil paper umbrella to look for the plum blossoms. Strolling to the edge of the plum blossom forest, she saw a drooping flower gate that was wide open. Opposite was a courtyard where ordinary people lived. Although it didn't occupy a large area, there were at least 7 or 8 families squeezed together. It was now the end of spring and the weather was cold. It didn't feel cold when the sun was out, but when it rained, it was piercingly cold. In addition, the mountaintop was much colder than the flat ground. It was simply impossible to live without burning charcoal. The Taoist children were afraid that the pilgrims would fall ill from the cold, so they piled up a lot of charcoal in a corner of the courtyard. They also burned a large pot of fire at the side. Anyone who wanted to start a stove would have to come and collect the sparks themselves. A beautiful servant girl was currently adding sparks to the fire she had brought along while adding charcoal to the pot. This was to prevent the fire from being extinguished when others came. The charcoal crackled as it entered the pot and emitted a large cloud of thick smoke, causing the servant girl to cough repeatedly. The crown princess covered her nose and mouth. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard a female physician beside her shout, "Not good, there's something wrong with the smoke." Everyone panicked and didn't know how to react. They saw the crown princess suddenly stagger, clutching her abdomen as she softly cried, "Quickly help me back, my stomach hurts." "She's having a miscarriage." Senior servant Song hurriedly ordered people to lift the crown princess and quickly rushed back. As if remembering something, she shouted at the nearby dragon scale guard, "Quickly go and find His Highness the Crown Prince and Commandant Yu. Also, capture that girl." The dragon scale guard obeyed the order and left. The head of the Baiyun monastery was proficient in medicine. After making a diagnosis, he discovered that the crown princess was about to give birth prematurely. He hurriedly ordered people to prepare the delivery room and immediately knelt in the Lei Zhu hall to pray. The accompanying female physicians and midwives were on high alert, their hearts burning with anxiety. If anything happened to the crown princess or the fetus in her womb, not to mention them, even 50 to 60% of the pilgrims in the monastery wouldn't be able to escape Commandant Yu's butcher's knife. The emperor was the eldest son of the first wife. Back then, he should have naturally inherited the throne, but he was almost killed by his brothers. From then on, he valued the children of the first wife and concubines even more. If the crown prince was incompetent, it would have been fine. However, the crown prince was both virtuous and talented. It was just that it was a bit difficult for him to produce an heir. Up until now, he had only produced a concubine son. This was the only area where the emperor was dissatisfied with the crown prince. The emperor had been eagerly waiting for this grandson of his for 6 years. It was no wonder that the crown princess was so nervous that she couldn't sleep at night. Just as the melon was about to be ripe for the harvest, someone actually plotted against him. It was easy to imagine how furious the emperor was. Not only were the palace servants and the monastery head bitterly disappointed, but even the crown prince's heart was bitterly disappointed. He was afraid that losing his eldest son would cause his imperial father to dislike him. When he saw Yu Pinyin striding in, he suppressed his anger and coldly said, "Yi Feng, investigate this for us." This us is usually too benevolent and unexpectedly caused them to harbor thoughts that they shouldn't have. If we find the mastermind behind this us will definitely report this to Imperial Father and have him grind his bones to dust. This humble one will definitely not disappoint your highness. Yu Pinyin didn't waste any words. He cupped his hands and headed to the prison to interrogate the suspect. The dragon scale guard had borrowed the cellar of the Baiyun monastery to build a torture chamber and was currently torturing the maidservant who added charcoal. The maidservant was truly unyielding. Her body was covered in whip scars, but she didn't relent. She insisted that she had just come to the capital from Diyu City with her master's family and had rushed to the ceremony to join in the fun. She had nothing to do with the various powers in the capital and was wrongly accused. The dragon scale guard's style of doing things had always been ruthless. They didn't care if you were guilty or not, they would torture you first. The two people executing the punishment didn't argue with her. They took a splint and were about to use it. After 2 splints, the maidservant couldn't take it anymore and screamed miserably, "I'm innocent, I didn't do anything. I'm not a maidservant, I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household. How dare you treat me like this? If my family finds you, they will definitely tear you to pieces." The Marquis household. Which Marquis household? One of them laughed contemptuously. Tear them to pieces. Ordinary dragon scale guard didn't even dare to touch a first-rank official. In this world, other than the emperor, only Commandant Yu could tear them to pieces. Not to mention that this maidservant was full of nonsense, even if she really came from a wealthy family, what could she do to them? The maidservant shook her head repeatedly and screamed, "I don't know which Marquis household it is. I only know that 14 years ago, I was mistaken for someone else and my father died under a bandit's knife. You can ask around, I guarantee that you'll know. I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household, I'm the legitimate daughter of the Marquis household." Suddenly, she felt that her threat just now was really inappropriate, so she hurriedly tried to remedy it. "As long as the 2 of you are willing to help me find my family will definitely repay the 2 of you handsomely. Today's harsh treatment will also be written off." I still have the swaddling clothes that my family left for me in my room. The cloth is a tribute from the palace, I can show it to you. The more she spoke, the more bizarre it became. The two dragon scale guards shook their heads and sneered, their hands gradually becoming heavier. As soon as Upinion stepped over the threshold, he heard the maidservant's threats and bribes. His stern expression didn't change, but his heart was slightly moved. He quickly walked over and waved his two subordinates away. He pinched the maidservant's chin and lifted her face to carefully examine it. The maidservant was already in tears. Feeling the cold temperature on her chin, she couldn't help but tremble. She forced herself to open her eyes and immediately gritted her teeth and growled, "It's you again. Isn't it enough that you harmed me once? You want to harm me a second time? What kind of enmity do you have with me?" This question was really inexplicable. Since when did the Grand Marquis Yongle have any interaction with a lowly maidservant? The two dragon scale guards increasingly felt that there was something wrong with this person's head. Upinion didn't answer. Seeing that her appearance was 70 to 80% similar to that of the Lin clan, he felt a little more confident. He opened her sleeve and saw that there was indeed an orchid-shaped red birthmark on her wrist. The sister that he couldn't find for 4 years was actually met in prison. One was an interrogator, and the other was a prisoner in a cage. He didn't know what the heavens had arranged. Upinion took 2 steps back and said indifferently, "There's no need to torture her. First, take her to the prison to await trial." The two dragon scale guards agreed in a low voice and didn't dare to ask any more questions. Upinion walked out of the prison. He didn't feel happy or relieved, and he didn't feel the excitement of finding his family. The only thought in his mind was, why did she appear here and get involved in this matter? Was it a trap set by someone with ulterior motives? All kinds of doubts were accumulated in his heart. He couldn't help but frown and decided to investigate the case first. The author has something to say, "Thank you to my little cute creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi." Chapter 37. After investigation, the servant girl's name was Kai Chi and her original name was Shen Miao Chi. She was the first-ranked servant girl of Zhao Minhui, the eldest daughter of Zhao and Shun. Yunzhou was located in the southernmost part of Lingnan. Miasma pervaded the air and transportation was inconvenient. It was a famous place for barren hills and unruly rivers. It was very difficult to be a magistrate there. Most of them were from poor families without any foundation or unlucky people who offended influential people. This Zhao and Shun not only came from a poor family but because of his upright character, he offended many colleagues. Seeing that he could not survive in the capital, he had no choice but to submit a letter to apply for a transfer. Because no one helped him mediate, he was finally sent to Yunzhou and stayed there for more than 10 years. The dragon scale guard checked him again and again but did not find anything suspicious. However, they found a problem with the charcoal. It turned out that the charcoal piled up in the corner was soaked in safflower, peach kernel, musk, Sichuan acaranthes and other herbs to make a medicine. After burning it in the fire, the medicine was forced out. Safflower and other herbs were not good for the fetus and after a special concoction, it could be called a tiger and wolf medicine. Every household came to add charcoal and the smell of smoke had already filled the temple for a long time. However, the crown princess was far away and after the smell of smoke was diluted, the female doctor did not find it. There were a few pregnant women like the crown princess in the temple and they all started to bleed that night. Upinion took the file and read it repeatedly. Finally, he called a few capable subordinates and ordered them to follow the clues of the charcoal and herbs to investigate. A few hundred caddies of charcoal had to be soaked and the amount of medicine needed was very large. No matter how well it was covered, there would always be traces left. Moreover, they could catch a few suspects during the purchasing process. He left behind the last two people and ordered them to investigate Shen Miaoqi. Not to mention the other's experience from childhood to adulthood, even the few grains of rice she ate and the few mouthfuls of water she drank had to be reported truthfully. After everyone left, he then revealed a gloomy and anxious expression. Finding his biological younger sister also meant that he found Xiang's family. After the matter was made known, Xiang would definitely be estranged from him and might even follow them to leave the Marquis household and go to Lingnan. Because of this concern, Yu Pinyin wasn't very keen on finding his sister. He only sent out a trusted servant, not a dragon-scale guard. When the Lin clan urged him, he would ask about it. He couldn't remember anything else. Otherwise, with his ability as a commander, he wouldn't have searched for 4 years without any results. Not to mention that he didn't recognize his own family. How could his younger sister, whom he had never even seen since childhood, be compared to Xiang'er, who they depended on each other for survival? If he could find it, then so be it. If he couldn't find it, then he wouldn't mind wasting time like this. However, even if he didn't look for her, the heavens would send her to him on their own accord, and even in such a dangerous situation. If Shen Miaoqi's identity was verified, it must be reported to the Crown Prince and the Emperor. But when to report it and how to report it, Yu Pinyin had to consider it again and again. If the Crown Princess was able to give birth to the twins, then this matter would naturally be easy to discuss. If the Crown Princess and the fetus met with an accident, then the Marquis household would be implicated. After considering all the consequences, Yu Pinyin did not let Shen Miaoqi be released and still kept her in the dungeon. He would wait for the case to come to light and then report it to the Emperor for the Emperor to make a decision. He was the sharpest knife in the Emperor's hands, a sharp weapon that existed to clear the Crown Prince's path to the throne. Even though the Crown Prince had both ability and integrity, his methods were too gentle. The Emperor was afraid that the Crown Prince would be suppressed by the powerful officials and relatives after 100 years, thus he boldly and decisively reorganized the court, leaving the Crown Prince a peaceful and prosperous era. The Crown Prince was absolutely not a talent to open up new territories, but he had the ability to protect what he had achieved. The great Han dynasty no longer had internal and external troubles, thus the Emperor could die in peace. And the reason why he was at ease to give such monstrous power to Yu Pinyin was because of Marquis Yonla's loyalty to the imperial family for generations and his wisdom in judging the situation. Because of this, Yu Pinyin did not dare to hide anything from the Emperor. As for the old lady, he did not leak any information to save her from being alarmed and afraid. Yu Xiang did not know that the main character had already entered the capital and had met with Yu Pinyin. She had a large blister on her back and was very uncomfortable. After bidding farewell to the old lady, she went down the mountain to return home. Feng Jichen saw her leave and casually found an excuse to go down the mountain with the Pei clan. He was currently still living in the Marquis household and thought that he might be able to get close to this beauty in private when he returned. Yu Xiu had sent people to keep an eye on Feng Jichen. Seeing him leave, she hurriedly followed, saying that she wanted to go back and take care of her sister. The old lady did not believe this at all, but with Xiang'er in the residence, there would not be any trouble, so she nodded. At this time, the news of the Crown Princess giving birth prematurely had not yet spread. Baiyun Taoist temple was also not closed, so their journey was very smooth. After walking half a li, the entire mountain peak was surrounded by dragon-scale guard. Not even a fly could fly out, much less a person. However, the Crown Prince's nature was magnanimous and he loved the people as if they were his own children. He only captured all the Taoists in the temple and the residents in the courtyard. Other people who were not suspicious were recorded by the dragon-scale guard. After they wrote down their statements, they were released back to their own courtyards. This action won him a great deal of goodwill from the people. With Yu Pinyin present, the Crown Prince simply let go of his hands and waited for the Crown Princess to give birth. This was his first legitimate son, the grandson that his imperial father had been looking forward to for 6 years. If he had a son in one fell swoop, then his position as the crown prince would be truly stable. Even if he had an accident, based on his imperial father's temperament, the throne would only be passed to his legitimate grandson, and not any of his brothers. Baiyan Taoist temple was naturally not as comfortable as home. As soon as Yu Xiang entered the room, she had people heat the earth. When the temperature rose, she immediately took off her clothes. Wearing only a small dudu, she picked up a bronze mirror to observe the blisters on her back. Lulu took the bronze mirror and helped her adjust the angle. She hesitated and said, "Miss, in the future, you have to avoid Master Ho. Even if you are biological siblings, you can't do that." "Do what?" Yu Xiang untied the knot of her vest and also took off her dudu. Two plump white lumps trembled as they jumped out, causing Lulu's face to turn red and her mouth to dry up. She thought that the Miss's body was really too beautiful. As a woman, she could not resist the temptation. She did not know how Master Ho felt. Thinking of this, her expression changed slightly. She secretly cursed herself for being possessed. Then she cleared her throat and said, that is, you have to take off your clothes in front of him. Today, you only have a duda left. Even though you are biological siblings, you should still avoid it." Yu Xiang carelessly waved her hand, "I know. I was just scared silly by the insects." Although she said this, she did not take it to heart. In the end, she could not agree with the ancient women's cruel view of chastity. If someone accidentally touched her, she would cut off her arm. What kind of logic was this? Moreover, Yu Pinyin was her older brother. What was there that she could not see? Lulu nodded in relief. She took out the jade face cream that Dr. Piao had sent last time and evenly applied it on her master's back. The blisters dried and scabbed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yu Xiang let out a comfortable moan, causing Lulu to swallow her saliva. She secretly thought that this was the meaning of the word stunner. Tao Hong was burning mugwort in the outer room. When spring came, the ground was always damp. If the house was not occupied for a day, it would be full of mold. If the mugwort was not smoked, it would be very unpleasant. After burning the mugwort, he prepared to take out the ashes and throw them away. However, he saw senior servant Chiu from eldest Mrs. Courtyard walk in on tiptoe. "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you acting so sneaky?" Tao Hong pointed at her and asked loudly. "Shoo, shoo." Chiu Clan put a finger to her lips and made a shushing motion. Tao Hong also became nervous. He quickly opened the curtain for her and let her in quickly. "What's wrong? Yu is up to something again." Yu Xiang lazily put on her outer robe and tied it loosely with a jade belt around her waist. Lulu reached out and pulled her robe closer, covering her sexy collarbone and the seductive cleavage in the middle. Chiu Clan lowered her head and said, replying to Miss, eldest Miss asked her servant Chinya to bring young Master Fong to her room tonight at 7:15. "What do you think we should do?" Yu Xiang glanced at the hourglass. There was still less than an hour until 7:15. She ordered, "Let them meet. I want to see what she wants. If I don't catch her in the act, she will never learn her lesson. Before 7, drive away all the servants in the courtyard. In any case, leave her some face. Bring me my mink cloak. I'll go take a look." Liolu hesitated and said, "Young miss, just let us servants handle this matter. If you go, it will harm your reputation." Yu Xiang sneered, "I don't expect to get married in this lifetime. What's the use of a reputation? Helping my brother guard this huge Marquis Yongla is the right thing to do. Go, bring me the cloak." Lulu saw that she had made up her mind and could only go get the cloak. She also had two strong women quietly carry her to the back of Yu's room. Chiu Clan hid in the side room and watched through the window. When they saw that Chinya had left, they used all kinds of excuses to get rid of the people in the courtyard. Yu was flustered and out of her wits. She didn't notice anything amiss. At 7:15, Qinya tiptoed into the courtyard. She first looked around the courtyard and was overjoyed when she saw that no one was there. She hurriedly waved for Fang Jichen to come in. Fang Jichen flashed into the room while Qinya stood outside to keep a lookout. Yu cried when she saw Fang Jichen. She sobbed, "Young Master Fang, you're finally here. Young miss, why are you looking for me?" Fang Jichen cupped his hands in a cultured and refined manner. His gaze stopped on Yu's tear-stained face. He was also very fond of this delicate and pretty woman. However, no matter how conceited he was, he knew that the Marquis household wouldn't marry both young misses to him. Compared to Yu and Yu Xiang, he was more moved by Yu Xiang's charming face. Moreover, her status was more to his liking. Although he wasn't fated to be with Yu's adoration was very useful to him. Thinking that he could at least fulfill her last wish, he followed Qinya to the rear courtyard. Fortunately, Yu Pinyin and the matriarch had taken many servants with them. Qinya was also familiar with the patrol guards changing shifts. Otherwise, he would have been seen by others. Yu used a handkerchief to wipe her tears. She then looked at him affectionately and said, "Young master, do you know why our 8 characters don't match?" "Why?" "Someone is interfering. They bribed the head of the Baiyun monastery to say that our 8 characters don't match and want to ruin our marriage. If young master is interested in me, then have Madame Pei find a respectable Taoist or monk and bring him to the Marquis household to examine my 8 characters. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, they have nothing to say. Does young master think this is feasible?" Fang Jichen stammered for a long time, unable to speak. He couldn't bear to reject Yu's deep feelings, but he also didn't want to marry her. Yu Xiang, who was at the back of the room, was so angry that she laughed. She ordered Tao Hong and Lu to push her out. The sound of the wheelchair turning caused Yu's expression to change greatly. Qinya, who was outside the door, was pressed to the ground by the Chiu clan's men. They tore off her clothes and tied her up tightly. Yu Xiang ordered Tao Hong and Lu to light a lantern. She raised her chin slightly and looked at the 2 people who had rushed out of the room. "Older sister is in such a good mood. You're having a private meeting with your lover in the middle of the night. If the old ancestor knew about this, she would be so moved that she would cry. The author has something to say, thank you to my cute little creatures, and thank you to all the friends who supported the original novel. Moi. Chapter 38. Yu was scared out of her wits, but she had no choice but to maintain her composure and yell, "Yu Xiang, you actually colluded with this old dog to harm me. You are so vicious." The Chiu clan curled their lips in disdain. Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows and chuckled, "If I wanted to harm you, would I have dismissed all the servants in this courtyard? Right now, all I have to do is clap my hands and shout, and a spoiled girl like you will definitely be caught and drowned in a pig cage." Yu was scared out of her wits when she heard this, and she unconsciously hid behind Fang Jichen. Fang Jichen had no choice but to bite the bullet and step forward. He cupped his hands and bowed, "Second miss has misunderstood. This humble one has no personal feelings for eldest miss, and we are not confessing our feelings to each other. We are discussing the matter of annulling the engagement." He paused, then continued with a red face, "The person this humble one truly admires is second miss, and I have already discussed this with my mother. In a few days, I will invite Iceman to propose marriage. This humble one has not thought things through before coming here. I hope second miss can forgive this humble one. This humble one does not have any romantic feelings for eldest miss, but I pity her." He privately believed that Yu Xiang was young, disabled, and had a low self-esteem. Seeing such a handsome and talented man fall in love with her, there was no reason for her not to be moved. Therefore, the scandal of trespassing could be skipped over. No matter how smart Yu Xiang was, she could never have imagined that Fang Zhichen would say something like this. One moment, he was caught having a secret meeting with Yu Xiu, and the next moment, he confessed to her. One day, he wanted to marry a concubine's daughter, and the next day, he took a fancy to a legitimate daughter. How shameless! Who did he think he was? The reincarnation of Panan? Yu Xiu stared at Fang Zhichen in shock. She could not believe her ears. Tao Hong was furious. He pointed at him and scolded, "You lecher! My master has never met you before. What the hell do you admire? Don't throw dirty water on my master." Fang Zhichen gestured and explained, at least he made it clear that they had met once in the Taoist temple. Yu Xiang narrowed her eyes and asked, "I can't walk. Why do you want to marry me? Who's going to take care of your mansion's affairs, your internal affairs, and your rear residence?" Fang Zhichen couldn't help but relax and smile when he saw that she had asked so many questions. "This humble one will first marry my cousin. The household affairs, the household, and the inner residence will all be handed over to her. Even if Miss has difficulty bearing children, the children she gives birth to will be under Miss's name and will recognize Miss as their mother." There was no need to worry about how the young lady was living in the Marquis household or how she would live in the Fang family. "I will definitely take good care of Miss and not let Miss suffer the slightest grievance. My cousin is gentle and obedient. She grew up in the Fang family. If Miss has any difficulties, she will take care of it for Miss and serve Miss wholeheartedly." Yu Xiang gently rubbed her lips with her fingertips. When he finished speaking, she couldn't help but laugh. Her delicate and beautiful face became even more moving under the candlelight. The red dot between her eyebrows faintly emitted a red light that could suck a person's soul into her zifu. Fang Zhichen was dazed for a moment, his heart thumping wildly. However, her expression quickly turned cold and she said sarcastically, "Your cousin is taking care of the household's affairs, managing the internal affairs, and managing the inner residence. Is this status a concubine or a wife? Not only do you humiliate me by taking a concubine as your wife, but you also want me to help you raise your concubine's children. In the future, when they grow up, they will logically divide my dowry. Do you think I'm a fool? Even a fool wouldn't do such a despicable thing." She sneered and continued, "Not to mention that I'm only crippled, even if my entire body was paralyzed, I still wouldn't like you. In terms of appearance, in terms of talent, in terms of family background, and in terms of character, which part of you is worthy of me? What right do you have to speak to me in such a tone as if you are giving me a favor? If not for my Marquis household, your Fang family would have collapsed and become mud in less than 2 months. At that time, you would no longer be the Tanhua scholar of the great Han dynasty, but a stray dog. You don't even have the qualifications to carry my shoes." She picked up the horsewhip and fiercely whipped the armrest of the wheelchair. She scolded, "Hurry up and get out of here, or else I'll break your dog legs." Fang Zhichen was stunned by her words. He couldn't believe that the woman in front of him who was as cold as ice was the beautiful woman who smiled brightly during the day. The words that came out of her mouth were not words, but sharp knives that directly cut him into pieces, dripping with blood. The great humiliation and anger suffocated him. He stood in place without moving, his face alternating between green and white. Yu Xiang waved at Lulu, "Go, call all the patrol guards over. If I kill him, my brother will help me deal with the aftermath." Fang Zhichen remembered that Yu Pinyin was the only person in the great Han dynasty who could kill imperial officials without asking for a reason. With his means, even if he destroyed the Fang family, no one would say a word, not to mention that the Fang family had so many deadly secrets that could be used against them. He covered his face and left. The beautiful memories of smiling under the sun in his heart all turned into that disgusting and frightening cold face. Prefecture Yu's second miss was a traitor with poisonous thorns all over her body. It wasn't until this moment that he truly believed this sentence. Yu Xiang turned to look at Yu Siyu, who was paralyzed on the steps, and said sarcastically, "Look, this is the person you didn't hesitate to go against your ancestors to be with. You haven't even married into the family yet, but you're already thinking about taking in a concubine. You even sneak into your boudoir in the middle of the night, not caring about your reputation at all. If you marry him, you'll have to suffer in the future, not to mention his family's mess." Yu Siyu struggled to get up and roared angrily, "Yu Xiang, you're shameless. You actually seduced Fang Zhichen behind my back. You're lewd, you're despicable, you're shameless. You're the one who should be drowned in a pig's cage." Yu Xiang listened to her scolding expressionlessly. When she finished, he said word by word, "Yu Siyu, you should be glad that I can't walk. Otherwise, I would have pushed you into a water tank to wake you up. The Fang family will decline in a few days. Do you think that exterminating an entire family is fun? Even if you want to die, don't drag my brother down with you. If it weren't for the fact that you and my brother share the same surname, do you think I would care about your life and death?" Yu Siyu raised her chin and sneered, "Yu Xiang, you don't need to coax me. You're not doing this for my own good. You're just afraid that I'll marry into a rich family and become an eyesore to you. Because you're a cripple, and I'm perfectly healthy, you're jealous, you're resentful, and you're always targeting and framing me. If the Fang family was truly at the end of its road, why would the emperor pick him as the Tanhua scholar? He would have been kicked out of the top 3 in the palace exam. Since he's the Tanhua scholar, it's clear that the emperor still thinks highly of him and the Fang family. It's because you know this that you're scheming to ruin my marriage, isn't it? You're so vicious." Yu Xiang was dumbfounded. After a while, he covered his face and laughed. The more he laughed, the louder his laughter became. It was one thing for this person to be stupid, but he also thought that he was very smart. It made her want to laugh. What did the emperor picking Fang Zhichen as the Tanhua scholar have to do with the Fang family's collapse? Thinking back to when the emperor was attacked by an assassin in the hunting grounds, he was saved by the commander of the imperial guards. The emperor first punished the commander with 50 strokes of the cane for dereliction of duty, then removed him from his post. After the commander returned home, the emperor issued an imperial edict to reward him for saving the emperor, and he was reinstated. This back and forth, up and down, was enough to see the emperor's style of doing things. He was very fair in court and dealt with everything according to the rules. He punished those who should be punished, and rewarded those who should be rewarded. He was impartial. Fang Zhichen's talent had nothing to do with his family background, so he gave Fang Zhichen an official title. If the Fang clan was indeed guilty, Fang Zhichen would be punished according to the laws of the Great Han Dynasty, and he would be demoted according to the laws of the Great Han Dynasty. However, Yu Xiang wouldn't tell Yu Siyu these things. Even if she did, she wouldn't believe her and would use the greatest malice to guess her intentions. Yu Pinyan's status was special, and he had made countless enemies in court. In these past few years, Yu Xiang hated that she couldn't cultivate until she was invulnerable to poison and invulnerable to swords and spears, just so she wouldn't be a burden to her brother. She didn't have many friends, and she rarely spoke when she went out. Today, Marquis Yongle only had contact with a few old friends of the matriarch, and almost never walked around the capital. She slowly led the Marquis household to the path of a lonely official, because this was what the emperor wanted to see. Even her unreasonable and overbearing behavior, and Yu Pinyan's unprincipled doting on her, were all things that the emperor was satisfied with. Yu Pinyan needed a weakness, and not everything was perfect. She did everything that she could do, just to let Yu Pinyan go further and more smoothly. However, Yu Siyu kept on doing stupid things. First, she curried favor with a noble lady, and then she tried to marry into a noble family. Why didn't she think about it? With the special status of the commander, How could the emperor be willing to see the prefecture you and those old aristocratic families work together? The emperors will doom you to marry into an ordinary family and live an ordinary life. Therefore, the matriarch rejected many families that were more prominent than the Fang family in order to reassure the emperor. However, a mere salt transport envoy, Si Yuntong, was able to make Yu lose her rationality. If she knew that there were other families that came to propose marriage, and they were all rejected by the matriarch, wouldn't she hate the matriarch to the bone? Thinking of this, Yu felt powerless. He waved his hand and said, "Lock her up in the room. When the old ancestor comes back, we'll deal with her separately." He then pointed at Qinya. "This girl will be flogged 30 times first, then locked up in the woodshed." The Chiu clan complied and pushed Yu into the room. Yu fiercely spat at the Chiu clan and shouted, "Yu Xiang, what are you trying to show off in front of me for? Let me tell you, you're just a wild." Before she could finish her sentence, the Chiu clan covered her mouth and locked her hands behind her back. They then casually found a handkerchief from the sewing basket and stuffed it into her mouth. Her curses immediately turned into indistinct whimpers. Yu Xiang naturally knew what she was going to say. He pursed his lips and left in the drizzle. The Chiu clan continued to detain Yu. When they all walked away, they advised in low voices, "My eldest miss, please stop. So what if Miss Xiang, isn't of the Marquis family's bloodline? The old lady has her eyes on her, Master Ho has his eyes on her, then isn't she the same? Not to mention that you can't compare to her, even if the real Miss comes back, she still can't compare to her. She has the old lady and Master Ho's love. What do you have to compete with her? Hurry up and stop. Otherwise, your marriage will be even more hopeless." Yu slowly calmed down. Her face was expressionless, but her hatred for Yu Xiang deepened. Madame Chiu waited for a moment before letting go of her. She immediately tore off the handkerchief in her mouth and gave Madame Chiu a backhand slap. She scolded fiercely, "You traitor, I'll deal with you sooner or later." The Chiu clan had originally been sent by the Lin clan to spy on Yu, so they naturally knew about Yu Xiang's background. However, she was quick-witted. She felt that there was no future for her if she followed the Lin clan, so she quickly submitted to Yu Xiang. She covered her red and swollen face as she walked out of the room. When she saw Qinya tied up on the floor, she immediately kicked her to vent her anger. She thought to herself, "What do you mean by traitor? A fine bird should choose a tree to nest in. With Master Ho's love for Miss Xiang, this prefecture is still under Miss Xiang's control. An idiot like you wants to surpass Miss Xiang in every way. Dream on." The author has something to say. "I have an appointment today. I'll probably be on the train when you see this chapter, full of passion. I'll make up for it when I get back. Moi." Chapter 39. The crown princess had been in labor for an entire night. The midwife stuffed ginseng slices into her mouth for the 5th time and shouted into her ear, "Your Highness, use more strength. Just a little bit more." The crown princess's consciousness was already blurred and she couldn't even scream. She shook her head slightly and looked like she was about to faint. If she really fainted, the 2 babies in her belly would suffocate, and she might not be able to save the mother. The midwife was worried, but she didn't dare to say it. She pressed hard on the crown princess' belly while looking back for Nurse Song. "Come here and say something to Master to wake her up." If she really fainted, everyone in the room would. She gestured to her neck. Nurse Song hurriedly came forward to wipe her master's sweat. She racked her brains to think of an excuse, such as "His Highness the Crown Prince is waiting for you outside, His Majesty has been waiting for you for a long time, if something happens to you, wouldn't your enemies be happy," and so on. The Crown Princess didn't respond, and her eyelids were getting heavier. Nurse Song suddenly had a flash of inspiration and shouted, "Your Highness, do you still remember the dragon phoenix lot that Miss Xiang drew? She said that the gods and Buddhas in the sky were using her hand to bless you. We are now in Baiyun Taoist Temple. Maybe Dao Zhu is watching us from the sky. The bamboo turned into a dragon and a phoenix into the sky. The light of Dao shines and dispels all evil. With Dao Zhu's blessing, those evil people won't be able to hurt you. You and the two little imperial grandsons will be safe and sound. This is God's will, God's will. Your Highness, if you use more strength, the little imperial grandsons will be out in the next moment. The crown princess' eyelids were still drooping at first, but when she heard the last few words, her eyes suddenly widened. She chewed the ginseng slices in her mouth and swallowed the ginseng juice. She screamed and used more strength. When people were at their most desperate, they would always pray to the gods and Buddhas they believed in for help. The crown princess was no exception. With the hint of the lot in front of her, she suddenly surged with infinite hope and strength. She actually came back to life at the moment of death and fought for a future for herself. The sky was slightly bright. The crown prince stood in the corridor for the whole night. Unknowingly, the drizzle had stopped, leaving behind only a sky-blue mist that shrouded the entire mountaintop. In the distance, the towering and precipitous peaks were faintly discernible in the rolling clouds. The scenery was breathtakingly beautiful. Suddenly, a gap appeared in the thick clouds, and golden rays of light spilled down from the gap, projecting onto the peak of a mountain. The colorful halos spread out layer by layer, making the sky-blue color of the mountain come alive. The light was so dazzling that it attracted the attention of several dragon-scale guards. They turned their heads to look and were stunned. Right at this moment, a shrill scream could be heard from the delivery room, followed by two loud and clear cries. There were people constantly shouting, "She's giving birth! She's giving birth!" Their voices were filled with tears of joy. The crown prince quickly walked to the door, only to see Song Mama holding a baby wrapped in a cloth in each hand. She cried and laughed as she shouted, "Congratulations, Your Highness! This is the little prince, and this is the little princess. Please take a look. Her Highness the Crown Princess is safe. Please don't worry." She leaned over and revealed the two red little faces in her arms. The Crown Prince stretched out his hands, not knowing which one to hug first. The huge stone in his heart fell to the ground, making him feel dizzy. But at this moment, countless fragmented halos spread out, enveloping the entire Baiyun temple in colorful divine light. Several dragon-scale guards pointed at the mountain peak surrounded by a circular rainbow and shouted, "The Tao light shines, auspicious signs descending from the heavens. This is the birth of the child of destiny." Everyone looked up and was mesmerized by this wonderful scene of nature. The words, "The Tao light shines," kept echoing in their minds. Song Mama recovered from her daze and hurriedly knelt down carefully with the children in her arms. She shouted, "Thank you, Tao Ancestor, for blessing Her Highness and the two imperial grandsons. Thank you, Tao Ancestor." When she said those words of encouragement to the Crown Princess, her heart was beating like a drum. Now that she saw this brilliant and dazzling Tao light, she was so excited that she almost cried. These two children were spiritual children bestowed by the Tao Ancestor. They would definitely be extraordinary in the future. The Crown Prince bent down to take the children and slowly walked out of the eaves, allowing them to be completely bathed in the Tao light. With the baptism of the divine light, all disasters would eventually be far away from them. The dragon-scale guards knelt down one after another and shouted, "Congratulations, Crown Prince, auspicious signs descending from the heavens." The so-called Tao light was nothing more than a circular rainbow formed by the refraction and diffuse reflection of the clouds. But in the eyes of ignorant ancient people, it was undoubtedly a miracle. Inside the delivery room, the midwife opened the window a crack and helped the Crown Prince consort up so that she could admire this rare spectacle. She said softly, "Nyang Nyang, the light of the Tao illuminates all evils and dispels them. It's hard to say how the mastermind is wringing his wrists and jumping about right now. You can sleep in peace. The crown princess smiled lightly and closed her eyes to sleep. Although her lower body was tearing apart, this was the first time she slept so soundly since she was pregnant. With the blessing of the Tao ancestor, she was finally safe. When the news reached the capital, the emperor was wild with joy and sent several urgent edicts for the crown prince to quickly send the crown princess and the two imperial grandsons back. The more happy he was, the more he hated the person behind the scenes. He secretly ordered Yupinian to thoroughly investigate this matter. He would rather kill the wrong person than let it go. Yupinian took the opportunity to report that Shen Miaoqi was suspected to be the blood of the Marquis household. The emperor did not take it seriously and said that once she was cleared of suspicion, she could be taken away, and he acted as if he did not know anything. Yupinian gladly accepted the order. When the crown princess woke up, the ban on by Yun Guan had not been lifted and everyone was detained in the courtyard to be investigated. Because the emperor sent an urgent edict, the crown prince prepared a comfortable and warm carriage and ordered the coachman to slowly return to the capital. When the crown princess left, she did not forget to bring old matriarch Yu back and ordered Song Momo to personally send her to the entrance of the Marquis household. After 4 shurchen, 1 shurchen equals 2 hours, Song Momo was still very excited. She pulled old matriarch Yu's hand the whole way and described the scene of the bright light. She repeatedly sighed, Miss Xiang, is indeed a spiritual person. There were so many lots, but she just had to draw the dragon and phoenix lots. Especially the last sentence of the lot, it was simply godly. If I did not see it with my own eyes, I would have thought that I was dreaming. It is a pity that Miss Xiang, left first and did not see it. The 9th princess was stunned at that time and stood in the courtyard jumping and screaming. Old Lady Tai Tai excitedly discussed with her and was also looking forward to seeing the miracle. It was a pity that she woke up late and only saw a bit of light that had not dissipated. Time passed quickly and they arrived at the Marquis household very quickly. Song Momo attentively helped old Lady Tai Tai into the house and had people carry several large boxes of expensive gifts, saying that Her Highness had brought them for Miss Xiang. The Pei clan also benefited from old Lady Tai Tai and took the last carriage to go down the mountain. Otherwise, they would have been frightened to death by a group of dragon-scale guards covetously staring at them all day. The two of them said goodbye at the fork in the road. The Pei clan hurriedly returned to their rooms to wash up while old Lady Tai Tai went straight to the west wing to visit her granddaughter. Old ancestor, why are you back so early? Yu Xiang raised her head and mumbled sleepily. It was already 8:45 in the morning and she was still lying on the bed sleeping. She did not wear anything on her upper body except for a pair of smoky green bloomers. Part of the quilt was lifted, revealing half of her fair and tender jade-like arm. When the sunlight shone in from outside the window, it actually gave off a lustrous glow. It was really very seductive. Old Lady Tai Tai walked over and tucked her in, then tidied her unkempt hair and scolded, "Lazy girl, what time is it and you are still lying in bed? Quickly get up. You don't know, right? The crown princess gave birth prematurely." Yu Xiang was completely awake. She propped up her upper body and asked, what did she give birth to? Is it a boy or a girl? She gave birth to a pair of twins. Her horoscope is really good. The heavens even sent down an auspicious sign. Old Lady Tai Tai told her the story she had heard from Nanny Song about the light of Tao shining on all things. She lovingly pinched the tip of her granddaughter's nose and smiled, "My granddaughter is really a little lucky star. Is your back done soaking? Let old ancestor take a look." Yu Xiang brushed her long hair aside and said, "It's much better after applying some medicine." "Old ancestor, don't be happy yet. I want to tell you something depressing." Old Lady Tai Tai was smiling at first, but when she heard the last part, her face became so gloomy that it could drip water. Yu Xiang rubbed the corners of her eyes and complained in a sobbing voice, "The Fang clan humiliated me like this. Old ancestor, you have to help me." After she finished speaking, she blinked her cat eyes and tears streamed down her face. She looked very pitiful. Old Lady Tai Tai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She poked her forehead and said angrily, "Quickly put away the cat urine. Do you think I don't know your character? It's already good that you didn't scold that Fang clan boy until he wanted to die from shame and anger." Yu Xiang wiped away her tears and smiled shyly, "If I don't scold him to death, how can I relieve the hatred in my heart? Old ancestor, you should quickly drive them away. Living in the Marquis household is annoying for no reason." "Okay, old ancestor will send people to drive them away." Old Lady Tai Tai rubbed the top of her granddaughter's head and sighed, "Men are afraid of entering the wrong profession, women are afraid of marrying the wrong man. The Pei clan married the wrong person after all. Those salt merchants stole the emperor's silver and lived more luxurious lives than the emperor. They even praised the salt administration officials until they didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. But they didn't know that the more wealthy they were, the closer they were to death. This time, the crown princess and the two little imperial grandsons were killed. The emperor's heart was filled with anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. They should be used to vent it. I also watched the Pei clan grow up in the past. When they were young, they still had some bearing. After soaking in that noisy and flashy place of Yangzhou for a few years, they were like vulgar merchant women who didn't have any knowledge. AI. Old Lady Tai Tai shook her head and sighed for a long time. Seeing that it was getting late, she repeatedly urged her granddaughter to get up. Then, she returned to her room and ordered Mama Ma to wake Yusiyu. Yusiyu trembled as she knelt down. Just as she was about to open her mouth to complain, she heard Old Lady Tai Tai ask in a deep voice, "How are you? Your wings have hardened. You even dare to do such a disgraceful thing as secretly meeting an outsider. You even brought him into your boudoir. Is the Fang clan so good that you didn't hesitate to lose your reputation to marry them?" Yusiyu gritted her teeth and kowtowed, "Granddaughter doesn't care whether the Fang clan is good or not. Granddaughter is only in love with Fang Gongzi. Since my reputation has been ruined, please grant me my wish, old ancestor." Yusiyu had heard the Pei clan describe her family's situation before. Not only were the clothes and jewelry they wore priceless, even the food they ate was incomparably exquisite. A simple plate of egg-fried rice cost 50 taels of silver to make. The hens that laid eggs ate ginseng, astragalus root, atractylodes macrocephala, red dates, and other ground powders every day. They were truly extremely wealthy. Moreover, Fang Jichen was so talented and had a bright future. He was exactly the kind of man she had imagined countless times in her mind. If she missed out on the Fang clan, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to find a better place to go in the future. Old Lady Tai Tai was so angry that she laughed and slowly said, "What do you mean by my reputation has been ruined? I'll deal with that Qinya later. The Chiu clan, Tao Hong, and Lulu definitely won't spread this matter. How is your reputation ruined? It's you who doesn't want it anymore, right?" She fiercely threw the teacup in her hand and reprimanded, "How did my prefecture you give birth to such a shameless thing like you?" Yusiyu's forehead was red and swollen, but she didn't show any remorse. She repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Please grant me my wish, please grant me my wish. Granddaughter doesn't have any other wishes. Please grant me my wish, old ancestor. I'll remember your kindness for the rest of my life." Old Lady Tai Tai muttered to herself for a while, then coldly said, "Since you've already made up your mind, I have no choice but to grant you your wish. In a month, I'll personally visit the Pei clan to discuss the marriage. I don't need you to remember my kindness. I just hope that you won't go back on your words at the last minute. Granddaughter will never go back on her words." You couldn't wait to promise. Old Lady Tai Tai stared at her for a while, then waved her hand to let her leave. Mama Ma asked worriedly, "The old lady, are you really going to marry eldest miss to the Fong clan? How can this be? Why can't it be? The young imperial grandson's death has caused the emperor to be furious. He'll definitely use thunderous methods to purge the Qing dynasty from inside and outside the court. In 3 months, the dust will have settled on the salt tax case. The Fong clan won't be able to escape this calamity. Fong Zhichen's recent scholarly achievements will probably be used to atone for his crimes. He'll become a commoner and his official career will be ruined. I won't have to worry about the emperor suspecting my marquis household. I can marry you over. Didn't she cry and beg for this? I'll grant her her wish." Mama Ma was speechless for a long time. She felt that eldest miss was hateful and pitiful at the same time. If she hadn't made such a fuss, she could have married into a well-off family and lived a stable life. If old Lady Tai Tai really steeled her heart to marry her to the Fong clan, she would suffer in the future. Chapter 40. Yu left the main courtyard. Seeing that no one was around, she covered her mouth with a handkerchief and laughed heartily. "What are you so happy about?" An extremely familiar voice suddenly came from behind her. She turned around to see Yu sitting among a clump of winter jasmine, wearing a light yellow dress with scattered flowers and clouds. The golden sunlight enveloped her body, making her look even more beautiful than the flowers. Unfortunately, she was a cripple. So what if she was beautiful? Yu sneered maliciously in her heart. She wiped the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and slowly said, "The ancestor has already agreed to marry me into the Fong family. In a month, she will personally come to discuss my marriage. Of course I'm happy. She's my biological grandmother after all." At this critical moment, she still cares about her biological granddaughter. She deliberately emphasized the word biological. When Yu heard this, she didn't feel the surprise or jealousy that she had imagined. She only narrowed her eyes in thought for a moment, then laughed softly. Yu angrily asked, "What are you laughing at? You don't believe me?" No, of course I believe you." Yu stopped laughing and raised her hands in a bow. "Then I congratulate you in advance, older sister. You must take care of yourself in the future." How could the old madam come up with such a despicable move? She would marry the snobbish Yu to the down-and-out Fong Zhichen, whose future was ruined, his family's wealth confiscated. She was probably really angry this time. Yu was very dissatisfied with her reaction. It was as if she had punched cotton. The feeling of weightlessness was very uncomfortable. She pursed her lips and said mockingly, "Thank you, younger sister. You must take care of yourself in the future. Older sister Full will be removing her clothes next month. Presumably, she will marry into the family soon. I heard that you had an argument with her at the Taoist temple and that you had an argument with her younger brother. Then what will you do when she takes over prefecture? You older brother might be protecting you now, but when he has a wife and children, he won't be able to take care of you anymore. Do you really think you can stay in prefecture U for the rest of your life? Why don't we quickly find a small house and move out, so as to avoid being despised by my brother and sister-in-law?" At the thought of Yu being kicked out of the house, Yu was overjoyed. She covered her mouth and laughed. Yu was holding a winter jasmine in her hand, but when she heard this, she unconsciously crushed it. The flower juice slowly seeped through her fingers and stained her sleeves. She secretly took a deep breath and took the embroidered handkerchief from Lulu's hands. She slowly wiped her palms and said with a smile, "Sister, you don't need to worry. How could elder sister not know?" Chang Yafu and her brother's marriage was probably not going to happen. My brother said that she can never step into the marquis household in this lifetime. How could that be? Yusiu was stunned. Older brother was already 20 years old. If he cancelled the engagement with Duke Jinggua's family, wouldn't that delay him for another 1 or 2 years? How could the old ancestor agree? Yu Xiang didn't say much. She waved her hand and ordered Tao Hong and Lu Lu to push her back. Yu Siyu cursed at her back before angrily leaving. As soon as she stepped into the small courtyard, she saw the Chiu clan's people escorting Qinya away. Qinya was beaten until she was on the verge of death and unconscious. She was half dragged by 2 old women, one on the left and one on the right. The marriage was finally settled, so Yu Siyu didn't dare to complicate matters. She hurriedly dodged to the side and didn't dare to stop them. She waited until everyone had left before weakly returning to her room. She lay on the soft couch by the window and gasped for breath. From last night's despair to this morning's ecstasy, her emotions had fluctuated so much that she was extremely tired. Now that her worries had been resolved, she took a short nap. When she woke up, she was in the mood to think about other things. She called the Chiu clan's people into her room and asked, Yu Xiang said that the marriage between older brother and older sister Full can't happen. Do you know about this? Of all the servants in the courtyard, only the Chiu clan's people were the most well-informed. Yu Siyu usually didn't need her, but she would always think of her at times like this. Although she wanted to drive this person away, she didn't have the ability to do so. Not to mention the Chiu clan's people, even the entire marquis household servants only listened to Yu Xiang's orders. Yu Xiang was very strict. She listed out all kinds of rules for the servants to memorize. The most important rule was that the servants were not allowed to bully their masters. Although she didn't like Yu Siyu, she had never mistreated her. She also didn't allow the servants to mistreat her. As a result, Yu Siyu's days could be considered comfortable. It was just that she wasn't satisfied. The Chiu clan's task was to keep an eye on Yu Siyu. They didn't want her to do anything stupid that would implicate the marquis household. At other times, they had to serve her as they should. They didn't dare to violate Yu Xiang's taboo. As a result, she reported truthfully, this servant knows a little about this matter. It should be true. Why? How could a good marriage be cancelled just like that? Older sister Full is already 19 this year. How can she live if the marriage is cancelled? Yu Siyu suddenly felt that they were in the same boat. She asked for it. She actually instigated her younger brother to pour caterpillars on Miss Xiang's head, causing Miss Xiang to have blisters all over her body. At that time, Master Ho was so angry that he ordered the dragon scale guard to find a basket of snakes and pour it on her younger brother's body. It scared the hell out of him. Miss Xiang coughed. Master Ho's heart ached. How could he allow an outsider to humiliate her? This Miss Chang hasn't even married into the family, yet she's already so arrogant. If she really marries into the family, won't she torture Miss Xiang to death? Master Ho definitely won't agree to it. The Chiu clan shook their heads as they spoke. Chang Yafu was also a fool. He clearly knew that Miss Xiang was Master Ho's treasure, yet he still went to provoke her. He had thrown away his good marriage for no reason. Yu Siyu was so jealous that she went crazy. She complained with a sobbing tone, "What's so good about that bastard? How can she compare to me? I'm Big Brother's biological sister. Why does he only dote on that bastard and not me? Old ancestor is also muddle-headed. He can't even differentiate between family and strangers." The Chiu clan saw that she was crying as she spoke and didn't have the patience to comfort her. They shook their heads and lifted the curtain to leave. They thought to themselves, all you think about is how to make trouble for Miss Xiang and frame her. Although Miss Xiang'er's mouth is vicious, when has she ever treated you unfairly? Whenever she says a word or two about revenge, I'm afraid you won't even be able to eat a full meal. One only knows how to play tricks and make trouble in the family. The other has already started helping the old lady manage the family at a young age and helping Master Ho share his worries. Everyone can see who is good and who is bad. It's just that you don't know your own limits. Relationships between people are formed through time. If you don't treat others well, why should others treat you well? You see, you got what she wanted, but Fang Jichen didn't sleep the whole night. When he saw that the Pei clan had returned, he urged her to pack her things and leave the Marquis household quickly. The Pei clan told him about the crown princess' premature birth and the auspicious signs from the heavens, but he didn't have the patience to listen. "Son, why are you in such a hurry to leave?" But what had happened? "Look at your face, it's very bad." The Pei clan asked worriedly. "Mother, don't ask any more. We should leave quickly." Fang Jichen didn't have the face to talk about what happened last night. He was so anxious that his eyes turned red. He had never been humiliated like this in his entire life. For a moment, he felt like he had lost all hope. When he was still in Yangzhou, he attracted envious and respectful gazes wherever he went. Now that he was in the capital, he didn't even have the right to carry someone's shoes. In any case, he was the person who came in third place and was admired by countless noble ladies. Who did Yu Xiang think she was? She was just a useless person. When he thought about it deeply, his admiration for Yu Xiang turned into resentment. The Pei clan became more and more worried. They grabbed him and interrogated him until Fang Jichen almost cried. Then, he stuttered and told them about how he was caught by Yu Xiang in the middle of the night. The Pei clan became anxious and scolded, "Son, you're so muddle-headed. Why did you go just because she asked you to? Why don't you use your brain? This is the capital, prefecture you. It's not our old house. How can you go to a place like the backyard? What should we do now? I'm afraid that your marriage with the second daughter of the Yu family won't work out. No, I have to hurry and apologize to the old madam." As he spoke, he rummaged through the boxes for expensive gifts. "So be it. I don't want to marry her either. Who can you marry now that you've ruined the reputation of the eldest daughter of the Yu family? You're in the wrong in this matter. You have to appease the old madam. Don't make enemies instead of marrying her." The Pei clan found a set of priceless jadeite head ornaments and wrapped it in a brocade box. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. I really don't dare to marry either of the two daughters of the Marquis family. Fang Jichen couldn't suppress his grievances and complained, "Mother, the second daughter of the Yu family actually said that I'm not even worthy to carry her shoes." "Mother, your son feels terrible." "What? Did she really say that?" Her son was the reverse scale of the Pei clan. She couldn't tolerate anyone saying anything bad about him. She immediately slammed the table and scolded, "What a little bitch. She really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She's just a useless person. If it weren't for..." "What for? You eat from my Marquis family and live in my Marquis family. You even scold my Marquis family. My Marquis family can't afford to keep such a great Buddha like Madame Fang. Please leave quickly." Mama Ma came in with a few maidservants and said bluntly, "Please point out what belongs to you. The maidservants will help you pack it up and carry it out. The carriage is already parked outside the corner gate. Don't waste everyone's time." "No, I want to see the old madam." The Pei clan became anxious. A few days ago, they received a letter from Master Fang saying that he was going to marry the family Yu's daughter. It would be best if she was the daughter of the first wife. Everyone in the Great Han dynasty knew that Yu Xiang risked her life to save her brother. Yu Pinyan's unprincipled love for her was no longer news. Marrying Yu Xiang was tantamount to grabbing Yu Pinyan's weak spot. What kind of person was Yu Pinyan? Those who were ordered to kill were all commanders. Their power was above the three departments and they only listened to the emperor's orders. With his help, it was like growing a few more heads. Not to mention that Yu Xiang couldn't walk, even if her entire body was paralyzed, they would still carry her through the door. The Pei clan knew that if they didn't complete their husband's task this time, they would definitely be punished when they returned. They pushed Mama Ma and the maidservants aside and were about to rush to the main courtyard. When Yu Pinyin came back from court, he saw a group of people surrounding a pile of boxes and baskets. Mama Ma pulled the Pei clan members by their sleeves and pushed them towards the corner gate. Feng Zhichen stood at the side awkwardly with dark circles under his eyes. What's going on? Yu Pinyin looked at the gatekeeper. Yu Xiang had covered up the scandal of the night party in the boudoir, so the gatekeeper naturally had no way of knowing. He shook his head and said, Master Ho, this servant doesn't know. They must have offended the old lady. Yu Pinyin nodded and turned to walk towards the west wing. However, he heard the Pei clan members shout loudly, My son went to second Mrs. Boudoir last night to have a private meeting with her. You won't let me see old madam, so I'll spread this scandal. Let's see who's the shameless one. Didn't Yu Xiang say that my son wasn't even fit to carry her shoes? Then I'll ruin her reputation and see who dares to marry her. At that time, old madam will come crying and begging me. Yu Pinyin stopped and turned to walk towards them. He used his thumb to push open the scabbard of the embroidered spring saber in his hand. The saber flashed with a cold light and emitted a buzzing sound. The buzzing sound was very subtle, but to everyone's ears, it was like a thunderclap. It was deafening. Not to mention, the gloomy and cold murderous intent that permeated his body froze the surrounding air. Chapter 41. What did your son do last night? Say it again. He said each word slowly, his thumb gently stroking the scabbard. His movements looked extremely gentle, but they contained a chilling murderous intent. The Pei clan members' tongues seemed to have been cut off. They opened and closed their mouths, but no sound came out. Yu Pinyin turned to look at Feng Zhichen. His gaze wandered over the bulging veins on his neck. His gaze was like an invisible blade, slowly and cruelly cutting through his flesh. It was as if his head would fall to the ground and his blood would splatter everywhere if he dared to answer yes. Feng Zhichen instantly broke out in a cold sweat. He covered his neck and stammered, I went to the first Mrs. room last night, not the second Mrs. room. My mother said that was nonsense. It was the first miss who begged me again and again that I reluctantly went. Commandant Yu, please spare my life for the sake of my grandmother. His legs trembled, and he could not stand straight. He almost knelt down. Yu Pinyin glanced at Mama Ma. Mama Ma nodded slightly, indicating that he was telling the truth. Yu Siyu had been stupid for a long time. She never knew who she should befriend and who she should not befriend. Even now, she was confused about who she should marry and who she should not marry. Yu Pinyin did not have the leisure to care about her. He sheathed his sword, turned around and strode away. As for the malicious slander from the Pei clan, he would make it up to old Master Feng. The thick murderous intent that filled the air slowly dissipated with his footsteps. The Pei clan mother and son breathed heavily, looking as if they had just survived a disaster. Madam Feng, young Master Feng, please. The carriage has been waiting outside for a long time. Mama Ma pushed the two of them and said sarcastically, Oh, you still don't want to leave? Shall I call Master Ho to send you off? The Pei clan mother and son turned pale with fright. They hurriedly supported each other and walked towards the Jiaomen. Mama Ma said to the two of them, Don't spread any rumors to harm the reputation of our prefecture. You should know what our Master Ho does. The dragon scale guard's eyes and ears are everywhere. If you say anything unpleasant, be careful of your tongues being cut off. The Pei clan mother and son walked faster, as if there were evil spirits chasing after them. Mama Ma spat and then went back to report. As a large number of blisters had risen on her back, she felt an unbearable itch when she rubbed against the cloth. Therefore, she ordered her men to set the floor heater on fire, and when the temperature in the room rose, she took off her outer shirt, wearing only a pink dudu and a pair of loose, smoky green bloomers, which nearly reached her waist. Lazily, she lay on her stomach on the soft couch, counting a box of small golden pigs. She didn't wear her hair in a bun. Her long, shiny black hair was like the most gorgeous satin, covering the entire bed. There were even a few strands that wrapped around her slender arms, making her black hair appear even darker and her snow-white skin appear even whiter. The strong color difference made people dizzy. Lulu held a box of ointment in his hands. He secretly swallowed his saliva as he gently applied it to the affected area. He tried to resist, but in the end, he could not resist. He reached out and slid his hands down his master's waist to pull up the bloomers that were slightly revealing half of his master's cleavage. But at this moment, the curtains were lifted and Master Ho's tall figure blocked all the sunlight. The light in the room immediately dimmed. Lulu was startled. He hurriedly picked up the mermaid gauze robe that was carelessly thrown on the soft couch and covered his master's back. He immediately bowed and said hesitantly, "Master Ho, it's time to change Mrs. dressing. So, shouldn't you leave us for a while?" The thin layer of mermaid gauze did not cover anything. Instead, it made her white and tender body look faintly discernible. It was very seductive. Yu Pinyan's eyes darkened. He took the ointment from Lulu's hands and ordered, "You, leave." Lulu was dumbfounded. Why was he the one who should leave? "Go out. Big brother will help me apply the ointment." Yu Xiang waved his hand heartlessly. Lulu walked out in a daze. He stood in the corridor for a long time before coming back to his senses. He saw Tao Hong bouncing over with Ah Lu on his shoulder. He angrily scolded in a low voice, "You damn girl, taking Ah Lu out to play again. How many times have I told you to tie Ah Lu to Mrs. door so that Master Ho can hear the noise when he comes? You just won't listen. If Master Ho wants to come, then let him come. Why would he want to hear the noise?" Tao Hong's face was full of confusion. Ah Lu also chirped, "Master Ho is here." Lulu looked at this silly person and silly bird. He waved his hand weakly. "Forget it. It's hard to explain it to you." In the room, Yu Pinyan sat on the edge of the bed. He lifted his robe and asked, "Are you feeling better today? Is it still itchy?" "It's much better than yesterday." Yu Xiang was playing with a small golden pig in her hand. Yu Pinyan nodded. He dipped a little ointment and applied it evenly to the still somewhat red and swollen area. After applying the ointment, his fingertips were still reluctant to leave. They slid towards the slightly sunken tailbone. Seeing the small waist and perfectly round and perky buttocks, his eyes became darker and darker. However, he heard Yu Xiang chuckle. She glanced at him with her watery cat eyes. "Big brother, it's so itchy." It was only then that Yu Pinyan came back to his senses. He realized that his fingertips had already left the wound. They stopped at her sunken waist and circled gently. The falling bloomers could not cover the faintly discernible cleavage. It made his eyes burn with passion. He withdrew his hand as if he had been scalded. He couldn't get rid of the slippery feeling that remained on his fingertips. He didn't dare to think or look. He put down the ointment, found an opaque brocade robe from the box, and covered his sister's body. After doing all this, he felt as if he had fought the most difficult battle. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his breathing was much heavier. Yu Xiang was a heartless person. When she was with her brother, she never thought about the difference between men and women. She pointed at the sweat on his forehead and laughed. The house is burning, and the sun is shining outside. Big brother, take off your coat. Look at how hot you are. Yupinyan's body wasn't hot, but his heart was. He could only smile bitterly when he heard this. However, he obeyed and took off his outer robe and court boots. He found a historical record and sat cross-legged on the couch. He sat beside his sister and slowly read. A calm heart naturally cooled down. Reading for a while might make him feel better. If he was asked to leave, he would rather stay and suffer in pain and happiness. Yuxiang had long been accustomed to her brother reading by her side. She continued to count her little golden pigs. She looked at her brother when she counted 1, then looked at him again when she counted 1. She seemed to want to say something, but then hesitated. Yupinyan felt as if a goose feather had brushed past his heart when he was stared at by that pair of bright and spirited cat eyes. He endured for a moment before he calmly said, "If you have something to say, say it. Why do you keep looking at me?" He turned his head and saw his sister propped up her upper body. The collar of her bodice drooped down, revealing a seductive cleavage. With just a glance, he could imagine how soft it would feel. He immediately retracted his gaze and stared at the words on the page. His brain couldn't recognize them anymore. He secretly took a deep breath. Yuxiang didn't notice. She stammered, "Big brother, I want to buy a house in the countryside. If you want to buy it in the capital." "What good houses are there in the countryside?" "They're all fields or brick houses." Yupinyan turned a page. His voice was a bit hoarse. "It's better to buy it in the countryside. If sister-in-law dislikes me in the future, I can stay away. You said I'm a good-for-nothing. If you protect me now, who knows how you'll think I'm a hindrance when you have a wife and children in the future." Yuxiang became more and more upset as she spoke. She even began to cry. She hurriedly raised her hand to wipe it away. Yupinyan didn't look at her. He stared at the page and said coldly, "Don't listen to her nonsense." It seemed that he should marry you off as soon as possible. Yuxiang bit her lip. Her expression was still very uneasy. Yupinyan was helpless. He quickly glanced at her and comforted her, "Okay, buy a house in the countryside. If she dislikes you, then let her move out." Yuxiang nodded. Only then did she pick up the little golden pigs that were strewn all over the place and put them into a box. She couldn't feel happy when she thought about how her brother would marry another woman and how she would no longer have any room to interfere in his life. After hesitating for a while, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She said hesitantly, "Brother, don't get married, okay? I don't like sister-in-law. I don't like anyone who becomes my sister-in-law. It'll be great if you're my only sister-in-law." Yupinyan's heart trembled violently. An indescribable joy flowed out from his cold and hard heart that had long since cracked. The corners of his lips lifted slightly, but his eyes were fixed on the book. He pretended to be indifferent as he replied, "Okay, brother won't get married. Brother will only live by Xiang'er." Even though she knew that it was impossible for him not to get married, Yuxiang was already very satisfied to hear this sentence. She covered her mouth. She was overjoyed like a mouse that had stolen oil. Yupinyan quickly glanced at her. The smile on his lips deepened. Once Yuxiang's worries were gone, she had the desire to talk. She recounted everything that had happened last night. She spoke very slowly, and her expressions were lively. She even gestured as she spoke, and it was very interesting to listen to. One of Yupinyan's favorite things was to return home every day and listen to his little sister narrate the day's events to him. Even though it was all trivial, it made him chuckle repeatedly. He was in a very good mood. When he entered the Dragon Scale Guard, he was a heartless and ruthless killing machine. When he returned home and listened to his little sister's nagging, he felt that he was a living person with flesh and blood. He simply threw the book aside and lay on his side beside his little sister. He pretended to casually wrap her in a brocade robe. Then, he wrapped his arm around her neck and half pulled her into his embrace. His large palm tightly clasped her small hand. Their 10 fingers intertwined as he listened to her vivid description. There was no trace of coldness or cruelty between his brows. Only gentleness was left. When he heard Fang Zhichen's confession, a trace of hostility flowed out of his eyes. He coldly said, "He really dared to dream." Yu Xiang snuggled into his embrace and said aggrievedly, "Of course he dared to dream. He just saw that I was a cripple and didn't take me seriously. It's not just him. Who doesn't want brothers' power when they marry me in the future? When they propose marriage, they make it sound so good. After I marry into their family, they won't treat me as a human. They might even order their concubines and maidservants to climb over my head and abuse me." "Brother, there's no one else in this world who treats me as well as you do. So, can I not marry? I'll just stay by your side for the rest of my life." The hostility in Yu Pinyan's eyes disappeared. He hugged her and laughed softly. His chest vibrated with a strong sense of joy. Did that mean he agreed? Yu Xiang also laughed. She used the tip of her nose to touch his and deeply breathed in the sandalwood scent that made her feel at ease. Through the crack in the window, Lulu saw the brother and sister entangled together. The strange feeling in her heart grew stronger. Just as she was hesitating whether she should find an excuse to go in, she saw Master Ho's personal bodyguard hurriedly run over. "Is there something you need from Master Ho?" She hurriedly went forward. "I'll have to trouble Miss Lulu to go in and report that the person Master Ho wanted to investigate has been found. 2 dragon scale guards are currently waiting in the study." The bodyguard cupped his hands. Yu Pinyan had already heard their conversation. He gently placed his little sister on the couch and covered her with a thin blanket. Only then did he put on his outer robe and court boots and leave. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.